time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one all. Pleasant good morning to you all. We are here for a special Morning Dew edition of the Dew Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Divular, of course.
Good morning.
Second half of the Clopen Shift. Up late on the Jimmy Dore Show last night. Up early for you all.
Tumble out of bed and I stumble to the kitchen. Pour myself a cup of ambition.
We're through the worst of it now. We're through the worst. Yesterday was definitely the hump day.
That was hump day. Wednesday, hump day. Yeah, tomorrow we got Tom O'Neill, author of Chaos on the Jimmy Dore Show. And today we have a program in store for all of you. We are dodging the wildfires here in New York. It smelled like smoke for me a few days ago. Now it smells like smoke for you in the city.
Oh, yeah. So last night I text Keaton because I walk out of my house, and this is how busy we've been. I hadn't left my house in 2 days. So right. I just got out just for my psychological health. I was like, let me take a walk before the Jimmy Show. And it smells like the park across the street is on fire. Mm-hmm. Like it's just like choking smoke. And then I realized later I was close. It wasn't the park across the street, but the park up the road was on fire. Inwood Park was on fire last night.
Yeah, well, there was a brush fire in Prospect Park a few days ago.
Yeah.
Fires in Jersey. Yeah, we got a whiff of it a few days back. Now our air is kind of clear. But, this is now a thing. It has not rained. I mean, we have gotten almost no rain for the last month or so.
And I gotta say, as the kind of person who enjoys those pensive, introspective, rainy days, it's a bummer.
Yeah. No, there's this. Yeah, rain.
That's why I
nice.
Can't deal with Los Angeles. I mean, now it's a hellhole. But even before it was a hellhole, I didn't like it. It always struck me as like the Truman Show. Hey, it's another beautiful sunny day here in Los Angeles. Yeah,
you get no seasons.
I'm too East Coast. I can't do it.
You get no seasons there. My wife likes Southern California. She likes the sunny weather and all that stuff. So she was saying, if we're gonna have wildfires here, we may as well live there.
Right. Well, that's another. Now, I have no idea why you would move out there. It's on fire for months out of the year. It's economically, like the third world with a very rich upper strata. Now, it's like they live. It really is like they live. Well,
that's the thing. It's totally unaffordable. I mean, it is really brutal. I mean, I looked up like neighborhoods because like my uncle lives in Long Beach, which is great. Long Beach is really cool. But there's a neighborhood called Signal Hill, which is not far from Long Beach, which is like the more affordable version of Long Beach.
Right.
But very close. So I just looked up, hey, what the hell? Let's see what houses are going for there. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, just unbelievable. Like unaffordable.
And why though? Why?
Yeah, I don't get it.
The fucking place is on fire.
Yeah.
It's fire. It's mudslides. It's severe class conflict. Why would you go there? Why would you want to live there now?
Yeah. No, it is brutal for sure. All right, folks. Well, we are going to get started. We got a lot to get to today. We have a great crowd filing in here this morning. 619 strong in the YouTube chat, 405 in the Rumble chat. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button over on Rumble, wherever you are. Make sure you are in touch with us. Alrighty, folks. So we touched on this briefly on the Jimmy Dore show last night, but let's take a closer look at DOGE. What is DOGE? The new department Musk and Ramaswamy will lead under the Trump administration. So
it's a good thing with the election of Trump that the common working man took back the government.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is going to be great. Great stuff ahead.
It's going to be great.
Elon Musk
kicked that oligarchy right in the pants.
Yeah, exactly. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will join forces to lead a newly formed Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE for short, President-elect Donald Trump announced. But what will the department do? Now, department should really be in quotes, since this is not a real department. It's basically a toy agency outside of government, which, as we'll see, is only going to last a little less than halfway into Trump's term. It's not even a permanent new agency. Named in an apparent nod to the meme cryptocurrency Dogecoin, DOGE is not actually a government agency. Instead, it will work outside the government to dismantle government bureaucracy, slash excess regulations, cut wasteful expenditures, and restructure federal agencies. So basically, it's an anti-woke incel think tank is basically what this is.
Yeah.
Trump said
that was statement. The original acronym, but they couldn't figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The specifics of how the department will operate aren't yet known, but it's clear its two leads, Musk and Ramaswamy, will wield influence under the Trump administration, partnering with the Office of Management and Budget and advising the president. It will become potentially the Manhattan Project of our time, Trump said. DOGE is on a deadline. It will finish work by July 4th, 2026, according to Trump's statement. So it's not even lasting halfway into the term. DOGE could come under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, which dictates how external groups that advise the government must operate and be accountable to the public. Federal employees are generally required to disclose their assets and entanglements to ward off any potential conflicts of interest and to divest significant holdings relating to their work. Well, that explains why Elon can't get a real job, because he's got all these defense hookups, right? So maybe that's why this has to be an unofficial, temporary, quasi pseudo-government agency and not an actual government agency.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, Dogecoin is up almost 119% in the last week, so they definitely don't want to divest.
Right, yeah, exactly. Right, that's another thing. Because Musk and Ramaswamy would not be formal federal workers, they would not face those requirements or ethical limitations. Okay, so it's all starting to make sense. So Elon just retweeted this tweet from September 7th. So what would you say you do here, Doge? I mean, this is the doucheification of government right here.
Yes.
This is just an onslaught of douchebaggery. Again,
I say, if this is not idiocracy, what is it?
Yeah, exactly.
What would idiocracy look like if not this?
If not this. How could you get dumber than this? How could you get more ridiculous than this? DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, with the little meme dog there, the Dogecoin dog. Another one here. What is it? Have I made a gay joke about MAGA in a couple shows? What am I allowed to do that? Am I allowed to do that once a week now? Is that the new rule?
We have to talk to the human resources.
Yeah, we have to get in touch with HR, Due Dissidence HR about that, because I don't want to breach company policy. But I'll let this speak for itself. Okay, look at this fucking weird one.
But you are not serious people.
This is a very strange one. This is a weird meme.
What the fuck is this?
What the fuck is this?
Was he fucking that dog?
MBS, Trump in MBS garb. Habibi, where are we going? There is no need to fear. Trump and Cabuso are going to send Doge to $1 with haste. DW about SpaceX. Trump Towers is going to launch Dogecoin into the stratosphere when he wins the election. The Saudis are funding everything. Yalla Habibi. Okay, that's just a strange one. I thought, I think this is all about weirdness. I figure I had to include that.
Okay, so just hear me out. Okay. So suppose you're a member of a kind of desert warrior, deeply religious tribal people, and you're seeing this. the view that this is the great Satan that needs to be overcome by your pure vision of society kind of makes a little more sense, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Well, it certainly reinforces that.
No.
Absolutely. Not helpful. Yeah, I mean, what a fucking strange thing that is. So basically, as long as people were memeing about this, I decided I would meme about this as well. So I made this little thing up. So all the real jobs are reserved for APAC recipients, but I came up with a fake agency that you can lead. There's a screenshot of Elon Musk learning about the formation of DOGE there. The Department of Government Efficiency, now it's on. Now they have their own Twitter and everything. So it just started yesterday, the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, I don't know why they get a gray check mark if they're not actually a government agency, but I guess Elon's the boss. He can do what he wants,
he
right?
Can do whatever he wants.
That's one thing that makes this a little easier.
All his mistresses get check marks on the house.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's one thing that makes this easier to get off the ground. Elon quote tweets, DOGE, it begins. This is funny. Preview of day one, says Jordan Rachel. Here's the ethos of DOGE right here in a nutshell.
Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera. Aunque te resistas. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación, afuera. Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social, afuera. Ministerio de Educación, Adoctrinamiento, afuera. Ministerio de Transporte, afuera. Ministerio de Salud, afuera. Ministerio de Desarrollo Social,
afuera.
Afuera. Se acabó el curro de la política. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
There you go. We got to have that on our sound drop. Afuera.
Afuera.
Yeah.
Yes.
That has to be on the sound drop. So, yep, that's more or less spells it out there.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people are very excited.
But in both cases, I mean, this we have to predict, but we saw that with that. Nothing about the military, man. Nothing about the military. The military budget is it do cut deep.
Oh yeah,
it do cut deep. So you really want to do something about efficiency. Very famously, the Pentagon cannot pass an audit. You would think these guys are so obsessed with government waste that they would lead with that every time they talk about this. Until the Pentagon can pass an audit, they are going to be under a microscope.
Yep. Well, we'll get to that. I have stuff for that. Don't worry. So, some people are very excited about this Insurrection Barbie. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are about to transform the government. I'm so excited about this government efficiency unit. I have some suggestions on what to cut. Now, you talk about a peasant mind. Payments to dead people, money for Pakistani gender studies, boosting Egyptian tourism, makeup classes for trans people in the Middle East, just spitballing. Now, obviously, just a ridiculous list of things that someone with no understanding of power at all would fire off. But you know who thinks that's a great idea? Elon. Elon actually quote tweets this bit of absolute stupidity. All actions of the Department of Government Efficiency will be posted online for maximum transparency. Well, the funny thing about
you can't take any actions. You can only make recommendations.
Well, also the funny thing about maximum transparency is that this whole agency, quote unquote, was set up the way it was so that you would not have to divest from your holdings that would pose a conflict of interest were you to have an actual government job. So it's very interesting that you're going to demand transparency for government spending. This whole agency was set up to avoid basic transparency so that you and Vivek, rich people that you are, could keep your investments, can maintain your conflict of interest because you don't actually technically work for the government. It's very interesting that you would make a big deal out of transparency when this whole thing is a sham department. And the reason it's a sham department mostly is to avoid transparency, to avoid you having to disclose your conflicts of interest.
Yeah. And let me just be clear. It is not that I don't believe, and we've talked about this a lot just generally, that if you want to talk about some of the DEI stuff and why it's taken off the way that it is, Peter Turchin has written about this, a lot of this is elite overproduction. You've got these elite families. They send their kids to college. They got to give them some kind of job. There's only so many architects and doctors you need. Oh, so you create a whole new school of thought, the diversity department.
That's exactly what it is,
So yes, do I think Elon can go in there and find a lot of government jobs that are just make work jobs for people's kids so that they don't have to go work with their hands? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a drop in the bucket next to the military budget, and they're not going to touch it. That's why I keep harping on it. Yeah, he will. I'm sure he will go in there and find jobs that will allow people like Insurrection Barbie to go, see, we had a tea taster. Why did we have a tea taster? What were you paying? Like 1/1000th of a penny per taxpayer for that entire department? Meanwhile, she's not going to say shit about all the money we're giving to Boeing, to Raytheon, to Northrop Grumman. That's the peasant mind.
Of course. Well, he says, anytime the public thinks we are cutting something important or not cutting something wasteful, just let us know. Okay, so anytime the public thinks we're cutting something important or not cutting something wasteful, just let us know. We will also have a leaderboard for most insanely dumb spending of your tax dollars. This will be both extremely tragic and extremely entertaining.
All right, so how do we let them know? Because we're going to start a drive to just send Pentagon. Pentagon.
Yeah. I mean, basically what this looks like so far is it's just going to be like an anti-woke incel dunk fest.
Of course.
Oh, look at this stupid.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're not going to find anything.
Yeah.
But that is such a drop in the bucket. And then ultimately, what's the end game here? To go after Medicaid, to go after your Social Security, to go after food stamps, to go after WIC. That's ultimately where this is going, because that's where you'd have to go to make any meaningful difference in the federal budget if you're not going to touch military spending.
Of course. So here's Vivek Ramaswamy. We have a mandate for drastic reform. It's time to slash the bureaucracy. So here he is talking about DOGE.
Look, the $2 trillion, I stand corrected. No, I want to be very clear about the scale. I want to be very clear about the scale that we're thinking here. We're not thinking small. We're playing big here because we have a once-in-a-generation mandate right now. The American people have voted for drastic reform of the government, and our federal government is broken. It's no secret that it is a fourth branch of government, the administrative state that makes most of the rules, that creates a federal bureaucracy that's hampering our economy. So what do we want to do? We want to go in and slash and burn that bureaucracy to help Americans, stimulate the economy, and to restore self-governance again, Sean. The people we elect to run the government, they're not even the ones who run the government anymore. It's these unelected bureaucrats. Republican politicians have talked about fixing this for a long time, not with a lot of progress. So I do think it's going to take a couple of outsiders. Elon and I have built a great friendship over the last year. We're working together intensely, and we're not going to stop till we get the job done.
All right. Well, as long as Elon's taking suggestions, Russell has talked about this. Vivek Ramaswamy. Oh, wait, that's not Vivek Ramaswamy. That's Vivek Ramaswamy's parody accounts. Oh, damn it. Got my hopes up there for a second. This is unbelievable and unacceptable. Pentagon fails audit for 6th year in a row from November of 2023. So I want to look at this article from Responsible Statecraft. Pentagon can't account for 63% of nearly $4 trillion in assets. Wow, that's a lot of waste. Someone tweet that at Elon Musk. I think we should all tweet that at Elon Musk. 63% of $4 trillion. What's that? $2.5 trillion? That's a lot of Pakistani gender studies classes there. Responsible Statecraft. The Pentagon failed its 6th audit in a row last month, and failed is putting it generously. The department actually received a disclaimer of opinion. According to the Government Accountability Office, that means auditors were unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to provide a basis for an audit opinion. So the outcome is more like an incomplete than an abject failure. But semantics aside, one major reason the Pentagon keeps failing audits is because it can't keep track of its property. Last year, the Pentagon couldn't properly account for a whopping 61% of its $3.5 trillion in assets. That figure increased this year, with the department insufficiently documenting 63% of its now $3.8 trillion in assets. So as they get more money...
Hey, Bob, I don't want to be a fuss or nothing, but is that an 16 in your backyard there? Because I don't know if that's safe for the neighborhood.
Yeah, right, exactly. So as they get more money, a greater share of that money becomes unaccountable, disappears, right? Yep. Insufficiently
and they're not
documenting.
Saying a fucking word about it.
Right.
They're going on about government efficiency. How do you not bring this up? This is what I'm saying. The fix is in. This fix is in. If you're getting excited, they're going to clean up the government. That's it. That's it. It's just like the woke grift in the podcast space. They're going to throw out all this culture shit that's not going to put a penny in your pocket.
Yep. Military contractors possess many of these assets. The 63% of the unaccounted for $3.8 trillion in assets, but to an extent unbeknownst to the Pentagon. Sounds like a lot of waste and fraud going on there.
Yeah.
The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, has flagged this issue for the department since at least 1981.
Wow.
43 straight years. Yet the latest audit states that Pentagon's target to correct insufficient accounting department-wide is fiscal year 2031. In the meantime, contractors are producing weapon systems and spare parts that they may already possess, an incredible waste of taxpayer dollars. Okay, so let's get DOGE on the case, shall we?
Yeah. Come on. Okay, so we are fortunate enough to have a platform, and we try to be responsible in how we use it. Harassing this DOGE department, we're going to find out what the avenues are to do that. But yes, I think
you have to tweet memes at them.
Is that it?
Yes,
is that
please.
it?
Please submit your snarky meme about what department needs to be cut. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's efficient. So tweet at this department to madness. Do it once a day. It once a day. Tweet something about the Pentagon failing its audits. Because if we can get thousands and thousands of people to do this, you're going to make it impossible for them not to address it.
Yep. So here's what they're actually going to do. Vivek Ramaswamy.
I don't mean address it. Do something about it. Yeah. I mean, they're going to have to acknowledge it.
So Vivek Ramaswamy says, here's a key point about our mission at DOGE. Eliminating bureaucratic regulations isn't a mere policy preference. It's a legal mandate from the U.S. Supreme Court. So they talked about the overturning of the Chevron doctrine, which basically authorizes agencies to interpret laws as they will. And also what they're going to crack down on are authorized expenditures that have expired. Now, I did some research on this. I'm still a little bit unclear. I'm not a lawyer, so we would have to get a sharper legal mind to really nail this down. But it seems to me like the reason why a lot of programs are renewed without authorizing an expenditure amount is because there's so many of them that to have fights over how much money should be allocated to each of them could just shut the programs down. And so to avoid that sort of congressional process, that bureaucratic process of quibbling over dollar signs, they're automatically renewed, even though they're technically unauthorized. That's my understanding. I'm not a lawyer. We would have to dig into this much further to really pin that down. But that's what it seems like to me. And that seems to be reinforced by this, because Max Kennedy points out Vivek has already been named by the Trump administration, so he speaks for them officially. And what he's announcing here is eliminating medical care for veterans. That's the single largest component of expired authorization expenses, $119 billion a year. So again, my assumption, and I want to just, I don't want to give people any false sense that I'm a legal expert on this. My assumption, based on what I've read and what I understand, is that these authorizations expire to avoid, congressional fights over the exact dollar amounts, and so that they are renewed year after year so that there's not a pause in veterans' health care. And it seems like what DOGE is going to do is they're going to crack down on this unauthorized spending, and looks like top of list, victim number one, veterans who need health care. That seems like the biggest target in their crosshairs. Now, if they want to come out and clarify they're not going to go after veterans' health care, yeah, they could do that. But as Russell just said, of course, this is a backdoor way of slashing at the social safety net. Don't forget, Elon's model leader is this guy.
Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte. Afuera, Ministerio de Cultura. Afuera, Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible. Afuera.
So of course that's what's coming. Of course that's what's coming. Of course that's what it's designed
how about
to
corporate
do.
subsidies? Afuera? Afuera for corporate subsidies?
Yeah.
For big military contracts, such as the types that your company benefits from, that Amazon benefits from. Amazon that Jeff Bezos, who no one has ever accused of being a stupid man, the Lex Luthor of our timeline, very wisely chose not to have his puppet paper endorse Trump's opponent. I guess he saw what was coming. Who knows? Bezos could have his own internal polling.
Right.
So are you going to afuera what the government gives to Jeff Bezos for cloud computing services? Hey, yes, there is a lot of waste in the government, but I think we can be fairly certain that the greater portion of it, and the more threatening to our way of life portion of it, the military intelligence services portion of it, they're not going to touch that.
No, this is a way to make austerity cool in their minds, right? They want to make it punk rock. Punk rock is to just slash away at the social safety net because you don't need that. Really what it is it's a burden to guys like Elon Musk who have more money than they could ever possibly spend in their life, but they have this obsession with making it certain to the rest of us that they are where they are for good reason, and that to interfere with their profits is to actually hold ourselves back. And so this DOGE is just this sort of, tech bro paint job on basically Reaganism. And it's not even going to last. Like I said, I mean, like if this is such a great idea, why not make this a permanent thing? Why does it expire July 4th, 2026? Why July 4th, 2026? That's the 250-year anniversary, right, of the founding of this country, of the signing. And so there's going to be this big ceremonious thing. Why does it expire on that day? Why not have it permanent? Why not even last the full term? Like it's obviously, this is performative PR that is meant to sort of normalize the slashing of the social safety net, meant to make hip and cool a sort of libertarian austerity model. And we're already seeing the results of this in Argentina. You've had a ballooning of the poverty rate. You've had a ballooning of suffering, a ballooning of hunger. And so, look, the results of this, to the extent there are any, are going to be not good. Believe me, not good. The best we can hope for is that this is just a vehicle for anti-woke virtue signaling losers to sort of get their digs in against the libs. Oh, they'll cut a gender studies program here and there. I mean, that thankfully will not hurt people economically. Slashing veterans' health care would hurt people economically. Are they going to do that? Could be. Could be. If there's any actual like political motivation to do this, that's where you have to worry. If this is just a big jerk off for Elon and Vivek and for this sort of, libertarian bro wing of the party to feel like they got something out of Donald Trump, then it's probably benign. Time will tell.
I think it's probably going to be a lot of that. I think it's going to be, they're going to cut a gender diversity department head here.
They'll gloat on Twitter, the libs will cry, and they'll be happy.
They'll talk about that, but what a fucking peasant you have to be to see Elon Musk tweet himself out with the Terminator sunglasses and go, fucking grow a pair of fucking balls, man. Grow a pair of balls. And Dave Smith, again, sperm is good for depression. Go suck Daryl Cooper's cock, and maybe you'll feel better, Dave. Anybody could have told you that this was coming, you fucking moron.
Yeah, I apparently started some shit with him. Not him, he hasn't responded, but I responded to a tweet of his this morning because he and Nick have been going at it.
Yeah, I saw that. What a fucking little bitch. What a little bitch. Oh, you're surprised that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are not living up to your expectations? Who could have seen that coming?
No,
I'm sorry, man. Listen. Yes, we were wrong about the election results, but it's a lot worse to be fundamentally wrong about politics and the people in politics. That's really our job. The whole election prediction thing is a game. It's fun. We said it at the time. We were only doing it because you're kind of supposed to.
Hey, look, there were two electorate models that were possible. I thought one was slightly more likely than the other, and I was wrong. It's what it is. I mean,
and we said at the time we wouldn't bet a dime on this.
Right.
It could very easily go the other way.
Right.
But in terms of what we said Trump would do if he won, I'd say that's a little more important, and we nailed that.
Yeah. I think misleading people about what Trump represents while encouraging people to vote for him. It's one thing to speculate if you're not going to actually tell people to go vote for him. If you're going to endorse a guy like this and say, well, I endorsed him despite his worst position, which is what Dave tweeted. I said, well, when his worst position is his full-throated support of a mass slaughter of children, yeah, you kind of own that. I mean, I'm sorry, you do.
Right.
You do.
Right.
And this wasn't hard to see coming. The fucking Adelsons were parading him around on stage while stuffing money in his pocket. What the fuck did you think was going to happen?
That's where I'm saying I can't even say he broke his promise.
Right.
He promised
exactly.
that he was going to make Israel great again. He explicitly said that.
Right.
So what did you think he was going to do?
Right.
Like, it's not like, I can't even call it a betrayal. He told you that Israel was his priority. He took that Miriam Adelson money and bragged about it. He bragged about what a good servant he was to the Adelsons when he was in office. So what do you think was going to happen? 4D chess. Once he get the fuck out of here with that bullshit.
Here, I'll hold on a second. I may as well just show people what we're talking about so that they're not lost. Here,
he gets very sensitive. He came
it's
at
the morning.
Me too,
we'll have a little fun.
Yeah. It's the morning show. Which, by the way, we have an Italy story for our European viewers.
Yes, that's right.
A little later.
So here we go.
And it has nothing to do with pasta.
Yeah. So Nick at RBN says, if you voted for Donald Trump, you're a Zionist. Doesn't matter if you have criticisms of Israel. If you give power to the Zionist mob, Alex Jones, Zionist, Candace Owens, Zionist, Tucker Carlson, Zionist, Dave Smith, Zionist, stop falling for these fake right-wing populists. And so there we go. So Dave says, just because you vote for someone doesn't mean you agree with them on everything, especially their worst position. This thinking, like socialism, is incredibly stupid. So then I said, when their worst position is their full-throated support for the most obscene crime against humanity of our time, your vote is essentially an endorsement of that position. I didn't retweet that or anything. I just assumed that would go fairly ignored, but it hasn't, which makes me upset that I used the wrong your. That was just my phone doing that. Here, it should be Y-O-U-R. So now I look like, I look somewhat illiterate to those who read that. But yeah, so that's what we're talking about there. Yeah, man. I mean, if you're going to direct people, this is what he said on the Jimmy Dore show last night. I said, if you actually told people, if you're actually pro-Palestine and you directed people to vote for Donald Trump and you made a big thing out of the fact that you were voting for Donald Trump because he's the last hope for America, how do you face your audience now? Like, how do you face people now?
Well, okay. Well, Dave Smith is basically Charlotte Rampling in The Night Porter. The Night Porter was a movie about a concentration camp victim who years later has a kinky affair with her Nazi guard. That's basically Dave Smith. He seems to have a fetish for the Zionists that he decries. He seems to actually be attracted to them. So, I think it was his weird kink to go on with Piers Morgan and defend his Nazi friend Daryl Cooper there. He probably did that with a butt plug in. He seemed to have a little smirk while he was doing it. So I don't know, these guys going and really accelerating this genocide, I think he gets off on it. I think it's the humiliation. He likes being humiliated by Zionist Nazis.
Yeah. Or maybe he just didn't know. Howie Brown, thanks for the $5. Thank you for that. On YouTube, Michael Castillo, thanks for the $10. Here at work, morning breakfast, listening to you too. Wakey, eggs and bakey. There you go. Thanks, Michael Castillo. Thanks for the $2, JM. Appreciate that. Palaganda, thanks for the $4.99. It's not just the bad choices of Trump's cabinet, but the inevitable falling outs he'll have with some of them sooner than you think, adding to the mayhem. Yeah, there you go. Aspen Fallen, as a communist with a Shiba Inu IDK, how you feel? As a communist with a Shiba in you, I don't know how to feel. Oh, you don't know how to feel. Well, I mean, look, I think we are in a strong position, obviously. I think you're getting a lib meltdown, and now you're getting a MAGA meltdown. Those moments of chaos, those moments of flux are good for, what, at least in the short term, are alternative political philosophies. Hassan Ahmad, thanks for the $5. Trump has House and SCOTUS, and he will deliver. U.S. electorate needs a slap in the face to wake up from bird brain election memory and not elect clowns. There you go. Mr. Fancy Pants, thanks for the $4.99. When capitalists talk about efficiency, reach for your wallet. There you go. Yes, Mr. Fancy Pants, absolutely.
You got it.
Pete Sweet says, all a smoke screen to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Absolutely. Adel Saeed says, Department of Efficiency needs 2 heads. There you go. All right, let's go to some Rumble rants here. What do we got? Eric Husso, join the club. I've had fires all around me this summer. Well, yes, you're a Southern California guy. Absolutely. Noah Goop, I live in Montreal. We had a few building fires downtown, but it looks like it's organized crime related, not a lack of rain. There you go. Well, at least you're getting some rain up there. You getting rain up there, Noah Goop? We're not getting any down here. I would gun Signal Hill gun on my bike and skateboard back in the early days in the 70s. Oh, there you go. So you know what I'm talking about. All that missing Pentagon money went to alien gender studies. Yeah, there you go. Maybe we can hope, Eric Husso. If that's the case, they'll do something about it.
It's funny. Before we came on, I was asking Keaton about his views on various paranormal things. I think because I watch, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I go through different phases. I used to put on like cartoons, because it would be just engaging enough for me to watch and not engaging enough for me not to fall asleep. Now I've been playing the Y-Files. I don't know how much of a compliment to the channel that is, although I do like the Y-Files. So I've got all this paranormal stuff on my mind. So Keaton, he does believe in UFOs, but not ghosts or exorcisms.
Yeah, no, I don't see convincing evidence for that in enough numbers. All right, let's move on here. What do we got? Matt Gaetz, Attorney General, maybe.
Oh, yes, right. Okay, so Matt Gaetz's moment has arrived, and Republicans say, are you shitting me? You think you didn't see it coming. Even they didn't see it coming. Congressional Republicans reacted with disbelief after President-elect Donald Trump announced his nomination for Attorney General would go to Florida Rep. Matt Gaetz, while the far-right congressman's allies in the House of Representatives took an early victory lap. Gaetz, who was first elected in 2016, has spent his time in Congress infuriating his colleagues on both sides of the aisle by picking fights on the House floor, including leading the effort to oust former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Gaetz also found himself the target of a House ethics investigation for a series of allegations connected to a criminal probe into his friend Joel Greenberg, the former tax collector of Seminole County, Florida, including accusations that he had sex with a minor introduced to him by Greenberg. Well, you know what? In France, that's not even illegal. Representative Don Bacon told reporters he had no good comment on the nomination. Representative John Duarte told Axios that the Florida representative would be a, quote, compromised AG. Some reacted in disbelief. Representative Mike Simpson asked a Punchbowl News reporter, are you shitting me? While a shocked Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville told a reporter for The Hill, holy cow, after taking a break from his job as a comic book sidekick to a superhero. But in a post on X later, Tuberville congratulated Gaetz on the nomination, calling him a true conservative warrior who will be a fearless attorney general who will go to war for the Constitution. Someone got a phone call. Gaetz, however, is sure to face a tough uphill battle to get confirmed in the Senate. Quote, Gaetz has a better shot at having dinner with Queen Elizabeth II than being confirmed by the Senate, Rep. Max Miller told Axios. Multiple Republican senators reached by the publication said they expected a tough confirmation process. Senator Susan Collins predicted he will face a lot of questions, while Senator Joni Ernst said the Florida representative had his, quote, work cut out for him. However, Gaetz's allies in the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus celebrated the appointment. Here's Lauren Boebert. We've stood together, we've fought together, we've won together. So proud of my friend and America's next Attorney General, Matt Gaetz. Representative Andy Biggs. There's no one better to lead the charge to dismantle the weaponized DOJ than my friend Matt Gaetz. President Trump could not have made a better choice. Now, before we go on, we've talked a little bit about what kind of game Trump is playing here and whether he threw up the Zionist maniacs so that he could get in the Tulsis and the Gaetzes. But hey, man, you want to talk about the 4D chess? They might have thrown up Tulsi and Gaetz to appease the MAGA people, knowing they'll never get confirmed and they'll never actually have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think Gaetz is going to have a very hard time because he's made a lot of bitter enemies in the what I guess used to be the establishment wing of the Republican Party. Right. I mean, when you're a reelected president, now you are the establishment wing of the party. But you know what I mean? The neocon sort of old guard. Yep. He has made a lot of enemies in that camp because of these bitter fights with McCarthy over Ukraine. And don't forget, you still got your Lindsey Grahams in the Senate. You know, you still got that wing of the party with votes in the Senate.
Lindsey
and every vote
Graham is saying positive things.
Oh, well,
he's kind of Trump's bitch now.
Well, maybe him personally is an exception, but you got senators you've never heard of who basically toe that old guard party line.
Right.
It only takes, 3? Because you have the Democrats with 48 seats. They're all going to vote no.
They've got 53, right?
So they need 3. So you need 3 Republicans. Yeah, 52 or 3, whatever the number is. You need, less than a handful of defectors. And, you could get that with Tulsi as well. So, yeah, I mean, I it's probably less likely in her case. But I think with Gaetz, because of what a flamethrower he is. Yeah, I think they're probably going to get a few votes to knock him out. I would probably bet against his confirmation at this point if I had to.
It's a question of how scared of Trump they are, and how scared of his people they are, and how committed Trump is, or whether this is just a game,
right?
Where he doesn't actually want them, but he wants to be able to say that he nominated them.
That's the other thing. How hard does he fight for them?
Right. So friend of show, Lee Fong, wrote an interesting article about Gaetz. So we'll take a look at that. We'll also take a look at Robert Reich's take, because that's a pretty good, give you a good sense of the distilled lib take on it. So the populist progressive take for Matt Gaetz. So amongst other things, Lee says, from his perch on the House Judiciary Committee, Gaetz has promoted a surprisingly consumer-friendly agenda, routinely breaking with his GOP colleagues on crucial votes. He previously supported legislative measures to break up Silicon Valley monopolies, sharply regulate the online data broker industry, ban non-compete employment contracts, and an end to the practice of forced arbitration, among other corporate accountability votes. He has also taken maverick positions on reducing FBI surveillance powers, cutting certain arms supplies to Saudi Arabia, and legalizing marijuana. In addition, Gaetz has staked a position at times to the left of some establishment Democrats in the fight over the Ending Platform Monopolies Act, a bill designed to curb anti-competitive practices by Amazon and Google. Gaetz ended up supporting the legislation, while California Democrats close to the tech industry, such as Zoe Lofgren and Eric Swalwell, voted against it. Gaetz was the first Republican to refuse corporate and lobbyist PAC money, joining a 2020 pledge on campaign finance, typically championed by those associated with the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. It is possible that Trump's choice of Gaetz rests largely on his loyalty and his criticism of the handling of the January 6th investigation. He has been an outspoken critic of government overreach in prosecuting nonviolent participants in the riots. Quote, as the Republican Party becomes more working class, we're less captive to the neo-libertarian view that everything big business does to people is okay, Gaetz told reporters earlier this year. That means, he added, the party can't be whores for big business and be the voice of the working class at the same time. So I think at least some of the animosity towards him is probably because of positions like that. Fong also mentions in the article that he has worked with AOC to introduce legislation to stop criminals like Nancy Pelosi from trading stocks in Congress. So now Robert Reich, with typical liberal hysteria, has a very different view of Gaetz. Matt Gaetz as AG would be laughable if it weren't so horrific and dangerous. Now, the more I read this article, the more support for Gaetz I had. The Kamala Harris campaign is now, sorry about that. Trump has nominated Rep. Matt Gaetz to serve as America's next Attorney General. This would be laughable if it were not so utterly dangerous. Gaetz as Attorney General would all but guarantee that Trump weaponizes the Justice Department against his enemies, past, present, and future. Ever since Trump was first indicted, Gaetz has been defending him, alleging that the prosecutions of Trump were politically motivated, that Joe Biden was behind them, charging the Biden administration with vindictiveness toward Trump, and asserting that Trump would have every right to engage in similar vengeance toward Trump's political enemies. Now, I want to point out he doesn't quote him throughout all of these accusations, which I find is very typical of these kinds of very hyperventilating liberal charges. I think what Lee had to say about that is a lot closer to the truth. Oh, what? They didn't weaponize the Justice Department against Trump? They didn't overcharge people who had been in the January 6th crowd? They didn't do any of that? But yes, no, did Gaetz actually say, no, we need to use the Justice Department to do the same thing? I very much doubt he said that. In making these bogus claims, Gaetz has often used identical language to Trump's wildly partisan and incendiary claims. If confirmed, Gaetz would lead the Justice Department's more than 100,000 employees at a time when Trump's allies are demanding a purge of career DOJ staffers who may have opposed some of Trump's efforts during his first term or worked on cases involving Trump or his supporters. Gaetz has defended Trump at every turn, arguing that Trump has never violated any federal laws. Gaetz voted with about 150 of his Republican colleagues to overturn Trump's defeat in the 2020 election. Well, I mean, that's a point. He also participated in what federal prosecutors have characterized as a rehearsal for Stop the Steal efforts, protesting the results of a hotly got cut off. You get the idea. He also participated in what federal prosecutor. Oh, there. I didn't do this very well. See, don't do this after doing a long show for Jimmy. Don't make slides right after that. Protesting the results of a hotly contested Senate race in Florida with members of the Proud Boys and other Trump loyalists. After Trump supporters attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, Gaetz was defiant. We're ashamed of nothing, he said publicly. In other words, nominating Gaetz to be Attorney General is only slightly less absurd than nominating Vladimir Putin to be Secretary of Defense. Well, frankly, he couldn't do any worse.
Yeah.
So there's your point. Counterpoint, Lee Fong, who's not, you can't say that's the view from the right. I think Lee is maybe the most even-handed journalist out there. We had him on the other day, and that's what I've observed with him. He's one of the least audience captured journalists I think, working, particularly in the kind of Substack space where you're very dependent on your subscribers. And, he calls balls and strikes, man. So, I take what he has to say about it seriously. Certainly going after Kevin McCarthy that way. And as I recall, the issue was really Ukraine funding. That's pretty based in my book. Now, on the other side with Reich, with these partisans, you don't know how much they're interpreting and how much it's true. I mean, it's I'm assuming he's not lying about him voting the way that he did on overturning the election results. And yeah, I mean, that's not good. And somebody in charge of the Department of Justice, he does sound like he understands that as the Republican Party's base becomes working class, it can't continue with Reaganomics. So it's a mixed bag. Overall, I lean towards this is one of his better picks, but certainly not perfect.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a better pick than most people I would think would be under consideration for that job. I don't think he's going to get through for that reason.
Right.
Like for that reason.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
I think he's too much a legitimate
They don't care about the
distillation.
stop the steal thing.
Yeah.
They care about him working with AOC to stop stock trading.
Yeah, I mean, I think like that stuff is too much a legitimate like distillation of like actual populism. I think the Republican Party now wants to sort of run on a populist brand without actually going in and taking these things apart in the way that an AG is equipped to do if he is actually confirmed. I think they probably figure at the end of the day that's too much power for a guy like Gaetz, who's too much of a wild card to have. That's why I suspect he won't get through. But yeah, no, I mean, I do think this is probably his best pick so far. I would say this is probably the best one for those reasons. And it's for those reasons that, unfortunately, black-pilled pessimist that I am, I don't think he's going to make it. And I think that those fights with McCarthy, again, this is a different confirmation body. You're talking about the Senate, but these people talk. He has branded himself a rebel within the party, and you're going to need every vote you can get almost. I mean, you can only afford to lose, one or two, maybe three, depending on the final count, although Gallego won in Arizona. So I think the Republicans are at 52 or 53 now. The point is you don't have a lot of wiggle room, and there are still a lot of neocons there. He's
their Elizabeth Warren.
Exactly. So we will see how that works out. But yeah, overall, I think the pick was pretty good. Probably his best so far.
Yep.
All right. Folks, we got to go to breaking news. This is too good not to do. And
by the way, he has resigned from Congress in anticipation of these hearings.
That's right.
That would indicate they're somewhat confident, but we'll see.
All right. Well, this is breaking news. This is too good not to do, and we're going to get Russell's raw take on this. So, Infowars was up for auction, and the auction ended. And so today, the winner of that auction to control Infowars has been announced. And the winner of the Infowars auction is The Onion. The Onion says it has bought
They said they
Infowars.
were going to bid for it.
Yeah. Alex Jones's site out of bankruptcy. The Onion, a satirical publication that skewers newsmakers and current events, said on Thursday that it had won a bankruptcy auction to acquire Infowars, a website founded and operated by the conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. The Onion said that the bid was sanctioned by the families of the victims of the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, who in 2022 won a $1.4 billion defamation lawsuit against Mr. Jones and his company, Free Speech Systems. Everytown for Gun Safety, a nonprofit dedicated to ending gun violence that was founded in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook shooting, will advertise on a relaunched version of the site under The Onion. Wow. I mean, that is an own. I got to say, that is a burn. That really puts a wet blanket on the Trump win for Alex Jones.
Yeah, there was a question if one of these manosphere billionaire types would go in and rescue him and put him back on.
Nope. Hung out to dry. That's a shame. The publication plans to reintroduce Infowars in January as a parody of itself, mocking weird internet personalities like Mr. Jones who traffic in misinformation and health supplements. Ben Collins, the chief executive of the Onion's parent company, Global Tetrahedron, said in an interview. So there you go. I mean, that really, wow. I mean, that really,
burn.
Like I said, that is a burn. That is an own. I mean, there's no two ways about that. I mean, and yeah, you would think maybe, you know, somebody would step up and try and outbid them. Yeah, Elon. Yeah, where's Elon? Elon couldn't step up. They couldn't get some of these rich guys to step up and step in and run that, you know, in Alex Jones's image and maybe hire Alex Jones, because that was the thing. That was the thinking. That was the plan. Right. Well, we'll have one of Alex Jones's friends buy this, and then they'll hire Alex Jones to basically do the same thing as an employee, but not an owner. Did not work out that way.
I guess none of them really wanted that kind of heat.
I guess not. I guess not. At the end of the day, you see where people's loyalties actually lie, right? Yep. Right? They'll give credibility to Alex Jones, you know, if it's good for, you know, a boost in visibility or whatever. But at the end of the day, do they want to put their money where their mouth is? No. I got to say, that is a burn. That is a very, very sick burn. That is one of the biggest burns of this century, I'd say. That's top 5 burns.
I'm curious how much they
century.
paid for it. Because I saw The Onion was talking about bidding for it as a troll, basically. But I didn't think they'd get it because I figured it would be out of their range.
Yeah, they actually got it.
Publishing is not all that profitable these days.
Well, I guess what this proved is that at the end of the day, his brand really wasn't worth what people think it is, right?
Because not without him. What are you buying?
Well, no, but I'm saying if one of his allies bought it, they could have kept him. They could have just kept him on. They could just hire him to do the show, right?
Sure, but then they have to take everything that comes with it.
That's what I mean. His brand ain't worth it at the end of the day. Yep. His brand isn't worth outbidding the Onion for Infowars, and now you're going to have...
What the hell was he talking about on Tusker? Lizard people? Nah, I'm not paying for that.
Yeah, right. Now you're going to have every town for gun safety run gun control ads on Infowars.com. I mean, that is just, whatever your politics are, you can't take that away from them. That is one of the sickest burns of the century. Yeah. I mean, you can't get sicker than that. I mean, this is the internet. This is YouTube. This is social media. This is own or be owned at the end of the day. And wow, did they get owned. That is a big own. They should rename their publication The Onion.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get better. I mean, it doesn't get worse than that. It really, I mean, you don't take it in the ass worse than that. If you're Alex Jones, you have The Onion buy your fucking media empire and run gun control ads on it. I mean, goddamn, that is brutal. That is brutal. They should have Dave Smith do a show on there. They, you know, obviously now this is a network that thrives on its own humiliation. You know, you could have a whole bunch of just self-deprecating right-wing commentators go on there and do their shows with the gun control ads running in between segments.
Yeah, and the moral of the story is audience capture is a hell of a drug.
Audience capture is a hell of a drug. That's right. That's correct. That's how he got into that whole thing. With the shooting and everything, his audience kept, because he didn't bring it up out of nowhere. His audience kept messaging him about it, and he didn't have the guts to stand up to them because they're his bread and butter.
Yep.
And here you go. Here you go. It's a cautionary tale.
That's the thing, man. Once you go down that road, it's a trap. It's a trap. You're better off staying small and honest than blowing up like that and being dependent on a bunch of fucking troglodytes. Fuck that shit.
Exactly.
Fuck that. Like, what is that worth? What is that worth? Look where it led him. Bankruptcy.
Yep. Bankruptcy. You know, I followed Alex Jones's career, you know, more than I think the average person in this space because I had my suspicions about 9/11 in October 2022. As soon as they started saying that they were going to go into Iraq, I was, 15?
You mean October 2001?
Oh,
I said 2022.
No, I'm sorry. I meant October 2002. Sorry about that. 2002, not 22. October 2002.
You know, I was quick on the uptake. By 2022, I was getting suspicious.
Yeah. No, in 2002, in fall of 2002.
Why they call me avant-garde Weiss.
Yeah. When I was 15, and they started chirping about going into Iraq, I said, okay, well, if they're going to attack a country that had nothing to do with 9/11, using 9/11 as an excuse, probably means they created 9/11. I mean, that was just my that was my intuition. And then, so by the time I saw his Loose Change film, I had already kind of researched most of what was in that film. And so I followed him. And, I think, according to Alex Jones himself, most of what he does is a sort of performance art. It's a lot of shtick. There's a certain political philosophy packaged in this very over-the-top performance art style, which I have actually no problem with if the targets of your satire, shtick, whatever, are Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. They're demons. I mean, whatever. They're public figures. They signed up for it. They signed up to be satirized in that way. Problem is...
You think Hillary Clinton's going to eat all that pizza?
Yeah, right, exactly. The problem is bereaved parents of school children gunned down at school did not sign up for that. And so you cannot incorporate them into your shtick. You just can't do that. And at first, he did not so much instigate that as he did go along with it because his audience wanted him to, and that's the lesson. That's the lesson.
That's it. You get in that habit. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, you're just a fucking dancing monkey.
Yep.
And in terms of the speech issues, I think I can speak for both of us. Our position has always been he should never have been pulled off platforms, and we were saying that at the time.
Yeah.
That it set a very dangerous precedent, and now here we are having to go to Rumble whenever we want to cover something that might be controversial to the algorithm. And that did start with Alex Jones. At the same time, they didn't invent libel laws for Alex Jones. Right. And that is pretty libelous to say about the parents of children that they're faking it,
that they're crisis
who got killed. And you know what? People who say, "Oh, it's a crime what they did to him." Listen, man, God forbid if that were your kid, you'd be very happy that this guy is destroyed. There are certain lines you don't cross, and there are certain things you don't say. Nobody took away his right to say it. He said it. He could still say it if he wants to, but there is certain speech that is libelous. These people are not public figures. They're not famous people. It's not unique to Alex Jones. If I sit here right now on the air, I'm on the air, and I name a person in my building and say, oh, well, that person is guilty of this or that crime, that's libel. They can sue me.
Right.
They can sue me for that. That's anybody, not just Alex Jones.
Right. No, I mean, look, the court of law is different. Was he railroaded to make an example of? Sure.
Sure.
Do you think that maybe the punishment didn't fit the crime? Sure. I think that's legit. I was against his deplatforming. And don't forget, these social media platforms who deplatformed him, they deplatformed him 6 years after Sandy Hook. After Trump won. They deplatformed him because Trump won and they needed to shut up alternative voices. They were perfectly happy to cash in on Alex Jones long after the Sandy Hook lies came out. That wasn't their red line. Their red line was, oh, shit, Donald Trump won. This guy actually influenced politics. We better muzzle him. And I am against that. Don't get me wrong. But look, like Russell said, certain lines you can't cross. That's one of them.
It's libel.
That's one of them.
Do you not
the
believe
parents
in
of dead
libel
children.
laws?
Yeah.
Do you want public figures to be able to just say whatever they want about you?
Right.
Personally,
say whatever they want
without
about
consequence? I mean, that's why we have libel laws.
If God forbid.
Certainly, I can't think of something more libelous than what he said about these parents.
Of course. If God forbid you were thrust into the national media spotlight because something unimaginably awful has been thrust upon you, and then you got this fucking Yahoo there saying that you're faking it, which is essentially what he's saying. If you're saying the event is fake, then you have to, by extension, you are accusing all of these supposed victims of faking it. Well, yeah, man, you're fucking around. You're fucking around, and sometimes you find out. I mean, that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
And somebody in the chat is saying he hardly said anything. Look into it. We did. We covered this way back. We covered it during the lawsuit, and we did look into it, and we played the clip of what he actually said.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did that shit, man. Yep. And you want to say the 1.5 billion is excessive. Again, if it were your kid, you probably wouldn't feel that way. But you can make that argument. We're not in favor of the deplatforming. We spoke against it at the time. But was what he said libelous? If it wasn't, what would be libelous if that's not libelous. And yeah, he said that shit.
You had parents have to move repeatedly because of harassment from his audience citing his show. You had one parent actually delete themselves. So yeah, I mean, look.
Yeah. Come on, man.
That's the breaks, man. Congratulations to the Onion.
This is what we have seen. This is the dark side of the rejection of authority, of the rejection of institutions. That rejection of institutions has been well earned by institutions. They have lied to people. They've misled people. There's been a total collapse in faith in institutions, and I share that collapse in faith. But you have a lot of grifters, you have a lot of con artists who take advantage of that, and it can very easily lead to a mindset that is just as gullible as believing everything institutions tell you. If you believe everything that is counter institution, if you believe every person who says, well, listen, there are lizard men running around and they don't want you to know about it, well, you're just as gullible as anybody who believes everything they hear from Pfizer, right? Like, how are you any different? And there are a lot of people who are making a lot of fucking money off of telling people what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. It's anything that, that was what we really got into with the Darryl Cooper thing. Like, the guy, basically, there are certain people who, as long as what you're saying contradicts the common narrative, they assume there must be truth to it. Look at what you're opening yourself up to with that assumption. I mean, you'll believe anything, right? Like, literally anything. Yeah, well, they tell you gravity exists. No, that's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. They just don't want you to know you can actually fly. People used to be able to fly until Isaac Newton told everyone there's gravity, and then they stopped flying.
Yeah, and the other part of this, too, is the people who say, because I know some in the chat of saying, well, he was fed bad information by the feds, he was set up. This is a common theme, too. They say the same thing about Donald Trump. Whenever he stabs you in the back, it's that he was tricked into doing it, he was manipulated into doing it. So most of the time, these are lions and truth tellers and fearless, all-seeing, all-knowing, red-pilled actors who see through all the bullshit and fight the power. But then when they get something unbelievably wrong with horrific consequences for ordinary people who are the victim of their crazy bullshit, then all of a sudden they're these infantilized dupes. They were tricked. They were deceived. They didn't mean it. Come on. One or the other.
You had Candace Owens go on and talk
Candace
about
Owens,
how
he's being manipulated.
Trump's being manipulated. He doesn't know what's happening. Okay, well,
he knows how to count money. He knows how to count $100 million from Miriam Adelson. That's not manipulation.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. She handed him a list, and that's who's in his cabinet.
She gave him $100 million and a list of cabinet appointees, and he followed it. He took the money and read the list. That's not manipulation.
Yeah, are you kidding? Are you kidding?
You're the
one
audience, manipulating your audience
yourself?
into thinking that Donald Trump gives a fuck about them. You're the manipulator.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's the easiest thing in the world. And from the beginning, when Kyle and Crystal were doing the whole Marianne thing, it's outrageous when you have these people who really know better lying to their audience like that. I get why you would do it, but it's wrong, man. It's wrong. You really have to have absolutely no care for the people who watch you, which a lot of them don't. They really don't.
Yep. All right. We'll go to some super chats here. Adil Syed, thanks for the $2. What does Russell think about director John Hughes?
I mean, what's there to think? Like, he was good at what he did.
Yeah.
And his stuff captures a certain period and a certain vibe in the country.
Yeah.
Like that whole suburban teenagers in the 80s, relatively carefree, looking back at it now. Right. He did the more like commercial version of the raunchier stuff of that period, like Fast Times at Ridgemont High or The Last American Virgin. He did the more cleaned up version, the more Hollywood version of those kinds of movies. I mean, they were good. I would be now, because I just did that Gen X segment. It would be funny to go back and watch The Breakfast Club now. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure I haven't seen that in at least 30 years.
Yeah, his movies are good. They're like, comfort food.
They're comfort food. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is one not in that teen realm that's pretty good.
Fadista, thanks for the $5. Thiel and Musk also looking for their biometric security border wall contract. There you go. John Michael, Elon and Vivek are libertarian performance art. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Absolutely. Consider the alternative. Definitely should start a group called DOGE Watch to monitor this thing and saturate it with suggestions. Re the Pentagon. Yeah, DOGE Watch. I like that idea. We could create a Twitter handle, DOGE Watch. I like that.
There you go.
That's not a bad idea.
See how long it takes before it gets shadow banned on X.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. Just shut it down. Exactly. Aspen Fallen, thanks for the $2. FYI, the Doge dog is a Shiba Inu. Oh, okay. Much wow. Okay, I didn't know the breed of that dog. Now that makes sense. Okay, now I get your joke, Aspen Fallen. I'm sorry. I plead ignorance. I did not know the breed of that dog. Kevin McAllister, speaking of John Hughes, right? $10. We need a DD Black Pill World Tour. Yeah, that'll be fun. I'd be for it.
No. Listen, man, we're not. We're gonna do that woke segment, and kind of Keaton's gonna handle one side of that, and I'm gonna handle another. Overall, it's not that we're black pilled. I just think you can't build something better than what you have without facing the reality of what is.
Right.
And what is a very black-pilled reality. You have to acknowledge that. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there going, yeah, Elon has a very good point about government waste. That's what you got to look these things in the face and see them for what they are. Otherwise, how do you strategize to beat it?
Exactly. All right, folks, we are going to move right on along. So, in other news, for those keeping track of the calendar, Israel's 30-day deadline to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza has passed. So you might notice the date highlighted at the bottom of this screenshot there from October 15th, 2024. U.S. warns Israel it may withhold arms unless Gaza aid starts flowing. Now, they gave them a 30-day deadline in mid-October. And in early November, there was an election. So you can really see what this was all along. This was a pitch to the progressives that, hey, we're gonna hold Israel accountable after Election Day, so vote for us. This at the time was tweeted out. Barak Ravid, Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin sent a letter on Monday to Israel demanding it take steps within 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza in order to avoid consequences in U.S. law for U.S. military aid to Israel. See letter here. Okay, so they made some specific stipulations about what they were looking for, enabling a minimum of 350 trucks per day to enter Gaza through upholding your prior commitment to allow assistance to enter Gaza consistently through all 4 major crossings, as well as opening a new 5th crossing. So a minimum of 350 trucks per day. There's a list of other demands, but that's the one I want you to remember in a few minutes. Now, understand here, before this list of demands, the letter reads, to reverse the downward humanitarian trajectory and consistent with its assurances to us, Israel must, starting now and within 30 days, act on the following concrete measures. Failure to demonstrate a sustained commitment to implementing and maintaining these measures may have implications for U.S. policy under NSM 20 and relevant U.S. law, which would prohibit military aid to a country that is acting in defiance of international humanitarian law. Now, notice the language here. Failure to demonstrate a sustained commitment to implementing and maintaining these measures. Doesn't say failure to perform these measures to their completion. Failure to demonstrate a commitment to maintaining these members. They're giving these measures, they're giving them some wiggle room, as we'll see, for good reason. So here are obviously some more points that they want them to work on. You know, some notes here. and isolation of northern Gaza, point number 3, by reaffirming that there will be no Israeli government policy of forced evacuation of civilians from northern to southern Gaza, ensuring humanitarian organizations have continuous access to northern Gaza through northern crossings and from southern Gaza. Well, what did we just see? We just covered a few days ago that they're not going to let people back into northern Gaza now. So they're in violation of that. And what do you think happened as a result of this? We have 8 humanitarian aid groups issue findings that since the deadline has passed, Israel has failed to meet those criteria as outlined in that letter. Here's CNN did a little segment on this.
Morning, President Biden is meeting with Israeli President Herzog at a critical point in another critical point in the war against Hamas in Gaza. Today is the deadline that the Biden administration had set for the Israeli government to significantly increase the amount of aid reaching Gaza. In a joint statement, 8 humanitarian aid organizations say that the Israeli government has not only failed to do that, but also, quote, to take actions that dramatically worsened the situation on the ground. CNN's Kylie Atwood is live in Washington with the very latest. And Kylie, if today is the deadline, what happens now?
It's a great question, Kate, and it's one that we are waiting to hear from the Biden administration. As you said, this is an assessment that 8 humanitarian and aid organizations did because this letter was a public letter. It was from the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense to their Israeli counterparts making these demands, more than a dozen very clear demands about what Israel had to do in terms of taking steps to allow more humanitarian support into Gaza. Now, what these aid organizations are saying is that based on what the United States laid out, their assessment is effectively that Israel failed this test, that they did not live up to the demands that the U.S. was making. On all of the demands that the U.S. made, they said that they failed to meet the criteria, and on none of them did they see full or significant progress from Israel. As you said, across the board, these aid organizations felt that Israel actually made the humanitarian situation in northern Gaza over the last month worse than it became better. And so what we're waiting for now is what the U.S. government is going to say about this. So in this letter that the 2 secretaries penned about 30 days ago today to the Israelis, what they said is that failure to actually demonstrate commitment on these measures, to actually implementing progress on these measures, could mean that the U.S. policy would be impacted when it comes to U.S. policy with regard to U.S. military assistance for Israel. So the key question here is, will the Biden administration be willing, based on their assessment, if Israel hasn't lived up to these commitments, to make some changes to U.S. military assistance to Israel? The State Department at this point is saying that they weren't going to get ahead of any actions that the U.S. government may or may not take, and they've been in touch with the Israelis about progress they've been making throughout the course of the last 30 days on this. Kate?
All right, so let's get an answer to this question. What is the Biden administration prepared to do as the humanitarian situation in Gaza has worsened over this past 30 days, not improved, and after Israel has failed to satisfy those benchmarks? Well, what are they going to do? Nothing. U.S. to keep sending arms to Israel despite dire conditions in Gaza. These are the findings. The State Department said on Tuesday that it did not plan to decrease weapons aid to Israel as a 30-day deadline set by the Biden administration passed without the country substantially improving the humanitarian situation in war-devastated Gaza. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin had warned in a letter dated October 13th that the United States would reassess its military aid to Israel if it failed to increase the amount of aid allowed to enter Gaza within 30 days. Again, that is not stellar reporting by the old gray lady there, because they had specific benchmarks that they were supposed to hit. It's not just this, this vague thing where, you have to increase the amount of aid. 350 trucks per day. That's going to come up later. That's just one of a long list of things. Not isolating the North, which of course they have done. They very famously isolated the North. They wouldn't even let reporters into northern Gaza to report on what was going on. Okay. The letter said that the humanitarian situation for the 2 million residents of Gaza was increasingly dire, and that the amount of aid entering Gaza had fallen by 50% since April. By law, the U.S. government cannot give aid to foreign military forces deemed by the State Department to be committing gross violations of human rights. UN officials have said Israel's continued blocking of humanitarian aid and targeting of humanitarian workers constitute violations of international law and could amount to war crimes. So we're going to play some State Department video here in just a second, but I just do want to take a pause. You know, when we were on the Post-duopoly show, Nick said that it would really be a stain on humanity if Kamala wins this election, given what's happening now. And that's what I thought when I read this. Imagine if they had won the election. Let's just say in a parallel universe, in an alternate universe where Arab and Muslim voters in Michigan were actually really won over by this boondoggle of, oh, well, we're going to give them 30 days to increase aid. Imagine they had won the election. Imagine that progressives had rallied around them and voted for them based on this promise. And then 10 days after the election, they say, well, our findings are in. Turns out they're doing a bang-up job, so we're going to keep the weapons going. Like, these are just it is just the most vile, despicable administration easily since George W. Bush. In a way, worse. I mean, I never thought I would say that about an administration, but in a way, it's worse. Yeah. Now, look, George Bush would have done the same thing had circumstances been this, right?
Sure.
But in a way, this is worse. I mean, this is just the deliberate shooting of fish in a barrel. You know, with Iraq, you could say they were totally indifferent to the suffering that operation would visit upon Iraqi civilians. But this wasn't a sustained and deliberate effort to murder as many civilians as possible or displace as many civilians as possible.
That wasn't the point.
That wasn't the express stated goal of
They just
war.
did not care about the collateral damage.
They just didn't care if it happened or not. This is intentional. This is malice. I mean, this is pure, unadulterated evil. And look at what they tried to do. They tried to trick people into voting for them based on this bullshit plan of we're going to increase aid. We're going to stop weapons if they don't increase aid in 30 days. They had no intention of doing it ever, obviously.
Right. Yeah, and what's really interesting is they lost. So there's not even really a political angle. That is how owned they are.
Yep.
If they really had that principle but thought having AIPAC coming after them was too dangerous, well, you lost now.
Yep. Well, now they're stuck eating shit.
And they still won't do it.
Exactly. Now they're stuck eating shit. And boy, are they going to eat a lot of shit. Here is the press conference with the State Department here. Our friend, our favorite man in the world here, Matt Lee. He should run for president. Matt Lee should fucking run for president. Who wouldn't vote for Matt Lee?
I'd vote for him.
Who wouldn't vote for that guy? You can't not vote. Tell me the working man. Tell me the average person's not going to vote for Matt Lee. Of course, they would love this fucking guy.
He stumbled out of a newspaper drama from 1976, directed by Coppola.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he looks like. Yeah. All right, here he is going after Fatsager.
Set this 30-day deadline today. You guys yourself set this 30-day deadline. Today is the deadline. Did they meet it, or did they not?
So I think first, when it comes to assessing the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the region writ large, I think it's important to remember that we have constant evaluations ongoing and constant assessments ongoing about the circumstances. And first, let me just say specifically, before I answer your question, that we've seen some steps being taken over the past 30 days. Specifically, we have seen the reopening of the Erez crossing. We have seen a new crossing at Kisufim open. As it relates to the Jordanian Armed Forces corridor, we have seen a waivement of certain customs requirement that humanitarian organizations had previously said was an obstacle. We've also seen some additional delivery routes open within Gaza, including Bani Suhelia Road, expanding the use of the Israeli fence road, as well as repairing the coastal road. We've also seen some deliveries resume and restored in the north, first to Gaza City, and in this most recent week to areas surrounding Jabalia. We've also seen the expansion of the Musavi humanitarian zone, and we have seen the institution of periodic operational pauses. This is all to say, Matt, we at this time have not made an assessment that there that the Israelis are in violation of U.S. law. But most importantly, we are going to continue to watch how these steps that they've taken, how they are being implemented, how that they can be continued to be expanded on. And through that, we're going to continue to assess their compliance with U.S. law. We've seen some progress being made. We would like to see some more changes happen. We believe that had it not been for U.S. intervention, these changes may not have ever taken place. But most importantly, we want to see continued progress. And that's what we're looking for.
All right.
Okay, so I just want to pause real quick because that whole list of things he just rattled off, this is where that language in the letter becomes important. And this is what gave it away as a bullshit ploy from day one. Failure to demonstrate a sustained commitment to implementing and maintaining these measures. Not failure to implement these measures, failure to demonstrate an effort. So that's what he's outlining here. They're making an effort. And the second point, because he says this a lot throughout the exchange, I don't know if I clipped a second instance of it, because I did kind of a supercut of different moments. But we're going to continue to monitor this. Keep in mind, they're out of power in 8 weeks. So, like, we're going to stay on this. You're not going to stay on this much longer. You're just running out the clock until you can leave and the new team comes in, and that's that. We're going to stay on it. We're going to stay on it. It's been happening over a year. You just lost the election. So now you're not going to be on this past mid-January. Then it's the new team comes into town.
Essentially, there isn't going to be any consequence for Israel not meeting the.
I certainly don't have a change in U.S. policy to announce today, Matt. No. But as you just heard me say, we are constantly going to assess the circumstances on the ground. We are looking for some of these steps that we've made. We want to make sure that they are sustained and expanded upon. And certainly, if we don't see that, if we don't continue to see steps in the appropriate direction, we certainly will enforce U.S. law. There's no doubt about it.
But you guys were the ones that gave them the 30-day deadline. It's hard to see your answers today, such as they are, as anything other than kind of giving them a pass for not meeting the criteria that were laid out in the letter.
I would not view it as giving them a pass because one, no one is up here. Certainly, I'm not saying that the situation in Gaza or the humanitarian circumstances are rosy. It is a very dire circumstance, and what we need to see is these steps acted on. We need to see them implemented, and the ultimate hope is that through these steps, some conditions have been created in which we can see things like additional aid, additional food trucks, additional measures being taken that ultimately will be beneficial to the Palestinian people in Gaza.
Okay, so that's part one. So now you get the general line of bullshit, which is that, hey, in the letter we said they needed some effort, and we've determined that they are making an effort, and so there's going to be no change in policy since they are making said effort. Now he gets grilled on specifics, which is why I want to draw your attention to this minimum of 350 trucks per day. And now I want you to think, according to that standard, given what you're about to hear, can you reasonably construe their effort as being sufficient to avoid penalization according to what the letter originally threatened? So here we go. Now there's a bit of a dog pile.
If they're not in violation, so from November 1st to November 9th, there was 404 trucks come in, right? It's like 45 to 44 trucks a day.
For the first week and a half of November, a total of 404 trucks came in over the course of 9 days. Now, the minimum is supposed to be 350 per day. So they barely cracked, 10%? If my math is right, somewhere around 10% of the requirement according to the letter. Now, once again, the letter did not require 350 trucks per day. It required a serious commitment, an effort. So is that an effort? Is 10% of the goal, does that constitute a serious effort? When you in school did a math test, if you got a 10 on the test out of 100, did the teacher write on the thing, "Good effort, Jimmy"? No, that's not an effort. I mean,
nowadays they might.
Nowadays they might. Yes. But yeah, so that's the number.
This is way beyond, as Tom said,
absolutely,
way beyond 350. Why it's not 350? according to your assessment?
So
listen to this.
Again, I don't want us to go down a rabbit hole of specific truck numbers. What our point of view is that some of these operational changes that they have made, that I have outlined in great detail now at this point, we believe that it should be possible to increase the number of trucks that makes it into Gaza every day. It is now incumbent upon the government of Israel, the United Nations, and others, now that there are these operational changes that we think can help with throughput, can help with delivery within Gaza, that can help with getting the aid where it needs to go. Our hope is that with those changes, we can see that number achieved.
Before you move to Lebanon, can I just ask you, why did you bother to put in 350 trucks a day if it doesn't matter?
I'm not going to speak to the...
I mean, you keep saying you're not going to speak to specific metrics, but you guys are the ones that made those specific. We didn't. We didn't give the Israelis 30 days to do all this stuff. You guys did. And now those 30 days are up. And as you've heard from everyone so far, and these aid groups that came out last night, they haven't met them. And all of a sudden you say that the metrics that you put out don't matter.
Exactly. The number of 350 was the State Department's number. So now you're going to say that you're going down a rabbit hole by citing what? Our own figures? That's going down a rabbit hole? It's not going down a rabbit hole. You're the one who said 350. What the hell are you talking about, rabbit hole? And he points that out.
Scum of the earth.
This guy's great. I love everything about this guy. You know, I tell the MAGA people that they're a little gay for Trump. All right, you can have it. I'm a little gay for Matt Lee, if I'm being honest. I love everything about this guy. I even like the dress. I like the pink shirt and the green jacket. You know,
I think they should
I like
bring
everything
back
about him.
the Night Stalker series and cast him in the lead.
Yeah, everything about this guy just works. The big pin, the glasses, the scruffy voice, the notepad. He doesn't have his notepad now. I guess he has the numbers in his head ready to go. But yeah, great point. Hey, you're rabbit hole.
He seems like the kind of guy who would be gentle with you, Keaton.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
I never said that they don't matter. What I said was...
said rabbit hole. I mean, these are metrics exactly like you put out. It's not a rabbit hole.
Meaning I don't want to take up time getting into a specific tit for tat on like truck numbers.
Well, then why did you put them in the letter?
You can't take
those
time.
metrics,
it's really important.
the metrics and the number of, let me just be very clear. The metrics and the number of trucks getting into Gaza every day absolutely matter.
Well, you just said they didn't.
Right.
I mean, you just said they didn't matter enough to determine whether we give them weapons.
Hole.
Right. You said it was a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, he
Crazy
just gets
stuff. Crazy.
He gets, pretty bodied here.
It is. I said that to him because I did not want to get into a specific technical conversation on inflows and outflow flows. I don't have more updated numbers for you beyond the ones what I said.
If you're not prepared for a technical conversation, then why did you lay out that criteria in the letter? Yeah. The answer is because it was all bullshit.
Well,
it was all bullshit to try
Yeah.
and trick progressives and Arabs into voting for you. And it didn't work. Now you stand up here a fucking loser who's going to be out on your ass in 60 days having to justify this bullshit story that you told in the most transparently cynical way. Like, the timing of that could not have been more obvious. In mid-October, you give them 30 days.
Right after the election.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And now you're caught in this lie as the losing candidate. It'd be one thing if you actually won. If you could at least boast to your buddies backstage, hey, turns out they bought it. We're here for another 4 years, whether they like it or not. No, you're a fucking loser. You come out a loser now having to sell this. And the credit to this team of press people, they're not having it. They are all over him here.
Matt, the metrics absolutely matter. The point that we are making, the two broad points that we made, is that one, on specific truck numbers, we think these operational changes that we've made can help get us to that goal.
You're at 10% of the goal.
The second point is that all of these steps, and even the steps that have yet to be taken, and even the steps that maybe were not even laid out in the letter, the point is not about specific steps. It is about what the totality of their contribution is to the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Well, the totality of the humanitarian situation in Gaza is that it's worse. If you want to talk about totality, the aid groups just said, we just showed you on CNN, the aid groups are saying they're worse shape now than they were when you sent the letter. So any way you look at it, according to your own criteria, they should be subject to an arms embargo right now. But they're not, because you never meant it. You never meant it in the first place.
Yep. No, this is the kind of gobbledygook that him and Count Morlock have been talking throughout.
Yep.
And it's very much who's the new nominee who said we should be learning from the Israelis.
Oh, Hegseth, the defense
Hegseth,
secretary.
this is very we learned from the Israelis. This is very Israeli. Oh yeah, we shot a bunch of journalists. We're looking into it.
Yeah, exactly.
We're looking into it. Yes, we have rule of law here. We're investigating. We'll get back to you in 7 years.
Well, they get into that too.
We're focused on.
But just one more thing. When you said we're going to continue to make those assessments,
this is to your point.
Can you point us to one assessment on any kind of IHL violation that the administration has done since the beginning of Gaza war?
Humaira, since October 7th, when we have seen certain things take place that are inconsistent with perhaps maybe how we would have gone about such a endeavor, or they are inconsistent with international law, we have raised those and addressed those specifically.
Oh, you have seen things that were inconsistent with IHL?
What I'm talking about specifically is incidents that could potentially have had components of that.
Okay, now look at the example he points to now.
Example I would give is the incident involving World Central Kitchen workers. When that incident happened,
the example is when the white people got killed. Now, look, that's not to denigrate. Those people were heroes, obviously.
Not at all.
Those people are heroes. They're much braver than I am, and it's a horrible crime that they were a victim of. But it is telling that the first crime he references there as a possible violation of international law.
Lafredo's braver than we are. We wouldn't fucking set foot in that country.
Of course. So that's not to dismiss what happened to them. It's obviously horrific. But it is telling that the first example of a possible violation of international law is when the Europeans got killed.
Yep.
I mean, that does say something about how they view.
Well, of course it does. Well, that was how we covered it. We covered that on Jimmy's at the time. And that was our angle. Like, hey, yeah, look, not to take away from them, but there's a reason that all of a sudden the press's hair was on fire. All of a sudden, all these people who are giving Israel a free pass, Morning Joe, they're all talking now about cutting off financial aid. They hadn't said a syllable in that direction until a few white people got killed.
Yep.
We were very quick to stress the importance of the need for further deconfliction mechanisms, for greater communication. So when we have seen things, Humaira, we have raised them directly with our partners in Israel.
Yes, you raised them, Vedant, but you're saying we're going to continue to make those assessments. And I'm asking you whether, I have not seen any of those assessments. Where are those assessments?
Those processes, Humaira, are ongoing, and they have been ongoing. We've spent a great deal talking about them.
Again, you're out of power in 60 days. They're ongoing. Your job is finished in 60 days.
Many lines of efforts that the United States has to assess those kinds of processes, and that work will continue.
Yeah, you need to get back to us on January 21st.
Right, exactly.
Will have an impact on U.S. credibility. You have clearly put out a letter, laid out specific criteria, and gave a specific deadline. And right now, you are basically not making an assessment line by line, or you're effectively saying, oh, that deadline was just to encourage them to take some steps. Are you worried at all that this might hurt, U.S. credibility? Because you don't seem to be following through.
First, I think you're putting
words in my mouth. Is she turning you straight again, Keaton?
Say that. Number two, let us not forget and lose sight again, and I spoke a little bit to Sean, that some of the steps that we are seeing being taken are a direct result of U.S. intervention. Over the course of this entire conflict, we have seen steps that are undertaken because of U.S. intervention and the role and the kinds of engagement that our diplomacy has had. So I take that to mean that we are credible voices and we continue to be credible actors in the region. And time again, what we have found to be true through our engagement in our diplomacy is that perhaps interlocutors may disagree with the United States on policy, may disagree with our approach, may disagree with a policy that other countries are pursuing. But time and time again, we hear the call for the United States to continue to have a seat at the table and for the United States to continue to engage.
Okay. by
engage, we mean arm, equip, and fund a genocide.
Well, exactly. That's why the United States
engagement.
is That's why, like what he's framing as, hey, they want us to have a seat at the table. What he's describing is other countries understanding the reality that we're funding the genocide. So if you're going to say other countries want us to have a seat at the table, well, insofar as they want us to blow the whistle and stop the genocide, yeah, because they know we're the only ones who could do that because we're sending them the weapons. They want you to take action. They don't want you to make excuses. They want you to take action, and they refuse to take action. So that is just like Nick said, what a stain on humanity it would have been if these criminals were rewarded with a second term, especially given, I mean, on top of everything else, the shamelessness of that stunt at the last minute to say we're giving them 30 days starting on October 15th. I mean, if that was not the most obvious ploy, I don't know what could have been. They couldn't have started the 30 days on October 1st so that they'd have to render a judgment right before Election Day. No, you start the 30 days in mid-October. I mean, the most obvious, the most cynical, the sleaziest political move you could possibly make. And now they have to come out here as losers and try and explain it away. Just pathetic.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty consistent with how they've handled this throughout. Honestly, I did in the back of my mind think maybe because they're going out of power, they'll try to do something a little different. I didn't think that there was a strong case for that. But wow, man, you don't even have a political motivation except, I guess, that they want to keep that gravy train going into the next cycle.
Yep.
That's what it's all about for these people. But hey, they have learned their lesson. You know, they are thinking about Rahm Emanuel for DNC chair. So
yes,
clearly there's a lot of soul searching going on at the DNC now.
That's right. We will get into that later on. Let's take some more Rumble rants and super chats. Hillary Hinton, is America great again yet? I'd actually settle for fair to middling. Make America middling again, mama. That'd be a good one. Yes. Dabzula.
That's a funny line.
Yes. Wait, you're letting Rubio go? This is not Trump's cabinet. This is Israel's cabinet. That's why Trump is lazy. This reach across the aisle thing is harder than I thought. You guys rock. Thank you, Dabzula. Appreciate that very much. Lindsay Stronk. These fuckers need to take a civics class. Congress has failed to fulfill its mandate for lawmaking and regulation for like 60 years. Executive power has exploded equals this bureaucratic hellscape. Well, that's why they have the DOGE, in theory. Alone Adele, of course, Elon, we will coup whoever we want. Musk will not slash Pentagon funding. His lithium intake doesn't seem to calm him down. There you go. Thank you very much. Russell, epic win with the Night Porter reference. Well played, sir. Hillary Hinton. Thank you, Hillary Hinton. Thanks to Russ, I now have the image in my mind of Dave Smith posing nude for Daryl Cooper with suspenders and SS hat. Thanks, homie. Thanks, Ken Minji. Appreciate that.
And you're welcome for that.
You're welcome. Raven Lash, show title idea for Tusker show, Tanky Talks with Tusker. Tusker's Tanky Talks. I kind of like that.
I liked Tusker Do.
What is that a play on?
There was a punk band called Husker Du.
Husker Du. All right. My favorite John Hughes film, 16 Candles. I thought Molly Ringwald would have a big career. You never know. Thanks, Cool Blue. Appreciate that.
I mean, obviously his masterpiece in the genre is The Breakfast Club.
Right.
But as I said, I think the more, having been there, I think the more seminal movie for Xers is Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah, that is a big one, obviously. John Michael says, come on, Russ. Lee Fong is a right-wing fascist and Robert Reich is a wholesome orator of the people, LOL. Thank you, John Michael. John Michael also says, Elon just didn't like Alex's misgendering the frogs. Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah,
maybe that's what it was. That could be it. That could have cost him big. All right, let's move on. All right, we have a Euro story, a European story. Russell, take it away on this.
All right, so we when we started doing morning shows, it's really for our friends over the pond. So we intended to do Europe stories. So we want to get back to that. With the election, it kind of got messed up because there was just so much election stuff to go. But our Italian friends are going bots. They're going bots. They're going crazy over there. They're going back to 1970 style commies versus fascists. You think it's rough in Seattle. They do not fuck around. So it's interesting. I've got two versions of this tweet, of this footage. Anti-fascists fought riot cops in the Pincio staircase in Bologna, Italy today during a march against the Casa Pound and Rete del Patriote groups who were holding a demo in the area. So let's take a look. All right, so very different take from the pro-Mussolini forces.
I was about to say, I guess Milan lost to Barcelona that afternoon.
So this is from Patriot. Italy, leftoid scum attacked the police. In Red Bologna, a large group of woke global multi-culti leftoids attacked the police in a vain effort to break through to the rally of Italian patriots who protested against the harmful mass illegal immigration from the third world. So that they had basically the same footage, but you see in a nutshell what's going on over there in the two different descriptions of the same event.
I'm going to step out for a brief moment. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. So divided Italy feels violent return to the rhetoric of the 70s. Now, I got to tell you, our friends in Europe are probably more aware of this history. Americans are so up their own asses. Most people don't know anything about the tumult of the 70s and the communist groups like the Red Brigade and the Biden-Meinhof group. Like most Americans don't know anything about that. When hundreds of hard-right protesters marched through Bologna at the weekend, yelling Italy for Italians, Europe for Europeans, left-wing activists and anarchists tried to drive them back, only to clash with baton-wielding riot police. Tear gas was fired and both police officers and protesters were injured, but that was just the warm-up as things started to get really out of hand. It was not the dreadlocked left-wingers or bomber-jacketed Benito Mussolini fans who pushed things to another level, but Italy's politicians, starting with the Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini, who demanded the closure of any meeting places used by the left-wing protesters. They were nothing less than, quote, communist insects, he said, reviving an insult used by 70s Italian neo-fascists. Matteo Lepore, Bologna's left-wing mayor, also went on the offensive, hinting that the green light for the right-wing march through the center of his city came directly from the Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government. Quote, they sent 300 black shirts, he said, referring to the paramilitary wing of the party run by the Italian fascist dictator Mussolini in the 30s. Before next Sunday's regional elections that will determine the future of Emilia-Romagna, which includes Bologna, the row over the protest rocketed the country back to the 70s when communists and fascists killed each other in street battles and joined deadly terrorist groups. The language used reveals how Italy's left-right divide remains bitter and how politicians will dredge up the past at the drop of a hat, even at the risk of reviving an era of violence the country tried to leave behind 40 years ago. Quote, haven't we had enough? Asked the columnist Flavia Parina in a front-page editorial about the unrest in Monday's La Stampa. Quote, this was a parody of a civil war that all adults should distance themselves from. The right-wing protesters drawn from the ranks of the neo-fascist group Casa Pound were pelted with objects thrown from balconies by Bologna residents who clearly recall the bombing of the city's railway station in 1980 by members of the neo-fascist terror group Avanguardia Nazionale, which killed 85 people. Many of the more than 1,000 left-wing marchers hailed from Italy's centri sociale, or social centers, the name given to organized squats where sometimes violent demonstrations are planned. As the tear gas dissipated, Meloni accused left-wing politicians of encouraging leftist hooligans, while Maurizio Gaspari, an MP in her ruling coalition, claimed that the Italian left was dragging the country back to the days of the Red Brigade, the left-wing terrorist group that kidnapped and killed the former Prime Minister Aldo Moro in 1978. The station bombing and the murder of Moro were key events in the so-called Years of Lead in Italy, which ran from the late 60s until the 80s as the country sat on the Cold War fault line between East and West. On the left, communists frustrated with being kept out of power turned to violence, while right-wingers were allegedly backed by the U.S. and members of, I'd say we could cross out the allegedly, and members of the Italian establishment to commit bombing attacks, then blame their opponents in a bid to deter the public from voting for the left, what we call the old Reichstag trick. The Bologna attack is now viewed as a prime example of the right's, quote, strategy of tension. Recent court rulings have established that the fascist bombers were funded by Licio Gelli, head of the notorious P2 Masonic Lodge, which included senior judges and politicians. Quote, Italy is now returning to the language of the time as the government depicts the opposition as increasingly radical and vice versa, while each becomes more extreme, leaving less room for moderation in politics, said Massimo Franco, a political commentator with the newspaper Corriere della Sera. Another factor is the number of hardline protagonists from the 70s who are still in politics or in the media. Ignazio La Russa, co-founder of Meloni's Brothers of Italy party, was involved in violent street protests as a youth member of Italy's post-war fascist MSI party, of which Meloni was also a member. In 2015, when the journalist Mario Calabrese took over as editor of the left-wing newspaper La Repubblica, one of its columnists was Adriano Sofri, a former far-left activist once jailed for ordering the murder of his father, a police officer. They don't fuck around over there, man. Franco said he feared that voters would switch off. Quote, Italian voters are by and large moderate and will stay at home at the next election, he said. Writing in La Stampa, Parina said that politicians were convinced that talk of communist insects and fascists would help them mobilize their core voters. And this is La Stampa representing the centrist faction. But she warned, past experience tells us that words can become deeds, dangerous deeds. Even those who did not live through that should have an inner voice warning them not to raise their voice against their enemy. So look, I'm far from an expert in this. I can tell you as an American, the politics over there are far more radical. I think we very often forget that. Things like what you're describing here. Yeah, we'll have incidents kind of like this, our own American version of it. We saw some of this in Seattle and Portland, like that kind of thing. It's very unusual here, and it doesn't have such deep roots in the soil of our politics, that kind of street fighting between fascist and communists. I mean, nobody here, they call themselves anti-fascists usually. They don't even call themselves communists if they call themselves anything at all. Like these kinds of battles between political factions that have deep roots in theory and European history, that is something we just don't have. That is very foreign to us. Now, what I do know of Italy is they're having a severe population collapse, and this is part of why houses are so cheap. you're always seeing articles. Oh, you could buy a house in Italy for $1 if you want to live in this town that nobody lives in anymore. They're trying to draw in there are whole towns in Italy that are full of Americans now, where the Americans have just come in and bought up all the houses. Also, from Italians that I know who live here now, the reason they live here is because the bureaucracy is so bad there that you really can't get anything done. And they also have a certain lack of job opportunity, from what I understand, because their employment laws, particularly in the government, make it almost impossible to fire anybody. And what winds up happening is you have this geriatric bureaucracy and no real opportunity for young people to get those jobs. So basically you have a sclerotic bureaucracy being run by septuagenarians. That's what's described to me from Italians. And that's why the ones I know who are here, that's why they're here. I had an Italian guy I know, he texted me after the election. And he said, so should I go home? I said, well, from what I can see with Maloney, it's worse. And plus you have that bureaucracy, so you might as well just stay here. But yeah, when we see things like this from America, that's very foreign to us. Like that kind of like real ideological battle that's that rooted in these old ideologies in that way. Like we do have our own version of it, but it's such an idiocracy version. This is a very European version, with much deeper intellectual roots behind it.
Yeah, and they have, obviously, as you told your friends, Maloney in power there. Obviously I don't hope that this happens, but I think as you start seeing the door-to-door mass deportations, you could start seeing some of that here. I obviously hope it doesn't happen, but that is certainly something to be worried about. I think that's a legitimate concern, especially since these are going to be happening in big cities if they're to be happening. This is where you're talking about certain mayors saying they're not going to comply. That creates an environment for this kind of unrest. And obviously, I hope it doesn't happen. But that is something, you think of this as something with deep roots over in Europe, and that may be true. But under the right circumstances, or should say the wrong circumstances, it can happen here. And, just like, Maloney, you obviously know, a lot of those same concerns about infiltration, about sabotage, about, scapegoating the left. Yeah. You don't think that Trump would do that? You don't think his administration would do that if there is unrest as these deportations start? Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was just in Italy about a year ago. And like when you're in Rome, that main governmental building, I forget what it's called now, the Palazzo Vecchio, maybe? I think I'm wrong. I forget what it was called. Mussolini built that.
Right.
Like that. That's like the center of the city. The balcony Mussolini gave his speeches from is a couple blocks away. I took a picture under.
Yeah, I saw it, yeah.
Put it up. So that history is with them in a way that I think as Americans we can't imagine. We're not aware of how much that's still a part of their reality. Not singling out Italy, I think in Europe in general, but particularly in countries where the fascists were in charge in that period.
Yes, for sure. All right. Why don't we plug our friend Dan Richman's podcast, the Heben Goy podcast, folks. You all know handsome Dan Richman, the Motley Jew who calls into our post-show Q&As quite a bit and our patron shows. Well, he's got a podcast called Hebe and Goy. This is great political, or I should say politics-free escapist content with a similar sense of humor to Russ and myself, but without all of the doom and gloom black-pilled politics of the day. It's like Seinfeld minus the genocidal undertones. One Hebe, one Goy, a Jewish guy and a Christian guy, or at least a non-Jewish guy. I don't know. Do they get much into his religious? Not from what I've seen, but he's a goy compared to Dan. Let's say that. So yes, you can go and subscribe to their show. It's on YouTube, Heeb and Goy. Just type that into the YouTube search bar, or go to Heeb and Goy, no ampersand, AND, heebandgoy.com to subscribe to their podcast. So you can get it on YouTube or in audio form. Great show, really funny show, very pleasant, easy listening for you guys. You get a lot of our subversive humor without all of this terrible news. So couldn't recommend that highly enough. heebandgoy.com, or put it into the YouTube search bar. All right.
It's actually called Palazzo Venezia.
Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. Blank state. Should the Onion be sued into oblivion for libel? Their whole MO is making shit up. Well, no, it's a satire magazine. You either support universal free speech or you don't. We do. Look into global tetrahedron onion parent company, shady. Yeah, I have no doubt that they, all these giant corporations are shady. Still an epic troll. Epic burn. Own. Pure own. I mean, that is an impressive own, I gotta say. I got to hand it to them. The 2020 voter turnout was more than just a minor anomaly. Shame the public has no way to audit the vote and were prohibited from raising questions in the relevant time frame on social media. Weird. Yeah, it's really weird that they decided not to do it again. When apparently they could have very easily just made 20 million votes out of nowhere. It's funny they just decided, fuck it.
Exactly.
Let's let Hitler back. Why not? Nina can't. If I wanted a joke, I'd follow you into the John and watch you take a leak. Now, are you going to help me, or are you going to stand there like a slab of meat with mittens? Planes, trains, and automobiles. There you go. Thank you, Nina. Appreciate that. First Queen Fire Dancer sent an email. FAO Russell, really interesting interview with a New York guy I think you will find really interesting. And when I looked on Twitter, he's Pete the Cop, and it's as if he is a DD guy. Oh, okay. All right.
Pete the Cop. All right.
We'll look into that. Furrows Queen, thank you very much for that. Sagar is so full of shit that he got really fat. There you go, Eric Rousseau. Appreciate that. Okay, Pete Sweet. Libs scream progressives didn't vote for Harris electing Trump. A Sophie's Choice progressives couldn't vote for genociders. I'll sleep well, wake up to fight Trump. Dems could not be rewarded. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel strong. I feel ready to go. And I think a lot of people on the, legitimate left do feel that way, and I think a lot of the liberals have succumbed to nihilism. I think that's a real good indicator.
like it's not black pill to say the entire establishment is corrupt. That's reality.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want to get to something hopeful, you need to acknowledge that.
Of course. All right, folks. So Donald Trump came up with a plan for, shall we say, education reform. Should we put it that way? Yes. This is a video that made the rounds on social media. Elon boosted this to, as of last night, well over 6 million views. It may have crossed a 7 million view threshold today. So let's take a look at what Donald Trump has to say about reforming our Marxist higher education system.
Colleges and universities, tuition costs at colleges and universities have been exploding, and I mean absolutely exploding. While academics have been obsessed with indoctrinating America's youth, the time has come to reclaim our once great educational institutions from the radical left, and we will do that. Our secret weapon will be the college accreditation system. It's called accreditation for a reason. The accreditors are supposed to ensure that schools are not ripping off students and taxpayers, but they have failed totally. When I return to the White House, I will fire the radical left accreditors that have allowed our colleges to become dominated by Marxist maniacs and lunatics. We will then accept applications for new accreditors who will impose real standards on colleges once again and once and for all. These standards will include defending the American tradition and Western civilization, protecting free speech, eliminating wasteful administrative positions that drive up costs incredibly.
They must advocate for Western civilization and American greatness and support free speech. Little contradiction there, no?
We already have a genocide going on, so Western values are already being upheld, at least one of their major pillars.
Yes, they must uphold Western values. They must preach Western supremacy and tolerate free speech.
Removing all Marxist diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucrats, offering options for accelerated and low-cost degrees, providing meaningful job placement and career services, and implementing college entrance and exit exams to prove that students are actually learning and getting their money's worth. Furthermore, I will direct the Department of Justice to pursue federal civil rights cases against schools that continue to engage in racial discrimination and schools that persist in explicit unlawful discrimination under the guise of equity will not only have their endowments taxed, but through budget reconciliation, I will advance a measure to have them fined up to the entire amount of their endowment. A portion of the seized funds will then be used as restitution for victims of these illegal and unjust policies that hurt our country so badly. Colleges have gotten hundreds of billions of dollars from hardworking taxpayers, and now we are going to get this anti-American insanity out of our institutions once and for all. We are going to have real education in America. Thank you.
Okay. So my views on this are nuanced and complex. This is something, I've given a lot of thought to over the years. All right. So first of all, defining these schools of thought as Marxist are an insult to Marxists and a real misunderstanding of Marxism, because as I have found in my own anti-woke rants, in the darkest days of cultural supremacy of that philosophy, the only people on the left who were really outspoken about not being down with that shit were the Marxists and the communists, because it's a contradiction of what they believe in, which is very much a material analysis. And they always recognized, for the most part, with exceptions, that this was a distraction from class. Okay, so there's that element of it. What he's talking about, this is kind of separate from that in terms of accelerated degrees. Sure, not everyone needs to be in college. Like, I would hope trade schools would be part of that. There are a lot of, especially now, a lot of the better paying occupations, a lot of the jobs that are more needed are not jobs where you're going to benefit from core curriculum, general education, anthropology, symbolics courses and that kind of thing. That's all true. For most of my life, the censorship was from the right. The censorship was from the moral majority. That has only flipped in the last several years as liberals have gained the cultural power to enforce their own vision of censorship and speech codes. But that was usually a right-wing project.
And now it's starting to flip back again now that the expansion of Greater Israel project is in hyperdrive.
Right. So that would be what I would say about this, because on the one hand, if you are someone who's sympathetic in principle to some of what he's talking about here, yes, I think a lot of this DEI, as we said earlier in the show, is a make work project for the children of the PMC class. And get rid of all that. I don't think you can solve Kendi's views aside. I don't think you can solve discrimination with discrimination. It winds up making people suspicious of the credentials of the people who are of a group that has been elevated based on race or other identifying characteristics. It makes people think they didn't get there on merit. That's an unspoken thing that hangs over affirmative action programs. That is just reality. And in the end, we're a pluralistic society. You just can't run it that way. You cannot, it's in the end, you cannot reconcile with the Constitution racial carve-outs in that way, or any kind of identity group. So all of that, getting rid of all of that, sure. Getting rid of DEI programs, sure. To argue, as some we'll see that more in the woke section, that this isn't happening in universities. That's absolutely absurd. Of course it is. Not in all, Maybe not even in most, certainly in the elite universities. It's most predominant, Ivy League schools, those places. But to say, I would be all for restoring, you teach Kimberly Crenshaw, you teach intersectionality, but you don't teach it as a religion. You don't teach it as the truth. You teach it as a theory. That's what college should be. You teach it as, yes, and this is what they think, and this is what they think. Now, to say there has not been a chilling of that kind of open debate on college campuses, that's disingenuous. Of course there has. My experience of movements like MAGA is now they're just going to go do what we're more used to. They're going to do right-wing censorship. They're not going to do what I'm suggesting, which is you still teach intersectionality, but you don't impose intersectionality. You don't make it the ethos of the school. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to wind up banning the teaching of that, which now you're back to right-wing censorship.
Well, it's a big smoke and mirrors act because they act as if the real debate is about the curriculum, whereas the real analysis, if you're looking at this as being a product of Marxism or anti-Marxism, is the structure of the university system and how that structure relates to society at large. The idea that you're going to orient society in such a way, as Democrats and Republicans have done for the past several decades, and now we're starting to move away from that because there's been a rebellion against it, but to orient society such that the bar to entry for a decent standard of living means plunging yourself tens of thousands of dollars into debt to get a degree from a university, whether it's a public or private university. Obviously, the private ones are more expensive, but public universities still cost a fuck ton of money. You still go into a lot of debt when you go there. That is right-wing fascism. That is absolute fascism, to orient society such that you can't get ahead without buying
kind of
tens of thousands of dollars. Well, yes, kind of, but the problem is when you categorize these universities as institutions of Marxism, as Marxist institutions. No, they're not Marxist institutions.
No, well, that's ridiculous.
They're capitalist institutions. They're fascist institutions.
Well, defining the intellectual movement that they're talking about as Marxism is disingenuous.
Right, but I'm saying that's not where the real debate lies.
Of course.
The idea that these universities are intrinsically left-wing or of the left is nonsense. The reason they talk a lot of that shit that he's trying to ban now or crack down on now is because they have to masquerade as liberal institutions.
Yes.
It's all a smoke show. They are gatekeepers of capitalism. That's what they are.
Right.
And I do agree with some of what he says. I'm mostly a libertarian on this issue. I don't believe that these universities should have the kind of societal power that they do. I do not believe they should dictate who has a decent standard of living and who does not. I think that is itself a fascist dynamic. And so I'm all for disempowering those universities. And I do think there should be entrance exams and exit exams. Hey, what exactly are people learning? What value is there in this education? Or is this just a dance we make people do to buy into an economic system that tends to keep people out who don't buy in? That's how you have a workforce, even a PMC workforce, that's largely in debt. Right? Even when you come out of college, even if you earn a good living, you're in so much debt that disempowers you. Even as a PMC worker, that disempowers you.
Well,
so this is a very, very hyper-capitalist dynamic that these universities are. They are a part of that. Whatever they teach the kids, that's not relevant what they teach the kids. Do you remember anything you learned in high school beyond basic reading, grammar, and math? Do you know how to balance a chemical equation now, 20 years later? No. What they teach you is not the point. It's not the point. It's the way society structures itself around these education systems. That is the point. And the way society structures itself vis-a-vis the university system is a fascist orientation. You must plunge yourself in debt in order to pass a bar of entry to satisfy job requirements set by who? By the rich.
And a big part of what you get from it, and this is where, what culture how culture impacts economics or impacts politics. It's nebulous, but it's definitely there, because part of what you get out of going to college is you learn to signal the right way. These people with their fucking Monet prints in their bathroom. I mean, that is part of what going to college is about. It's about learning what the canon of cultural references that someone who wants to signal as a member of the PMC is supposed to absorb. And they have only a superficial knowledge of those things. But that's the purpose of it. That's the purpose of it, to be able to signal, oh yes, I went to the MoMA over the weekend. Like that is part of it. It's indoctrinating you with that. That's why the art doesn't have to be good.
Well, right.
Because it's not about it being good. It's about being aware enough of it to reference it.
Right. Right. And so, like, what he's talking about there, I would have no problem with most of that if there was not, like I said, that very sort of controlling litigation of the criteria itself. Whatever the curriculum is, whatever they want to teach, that's for society to sort out. I think the marketplace of ideas has a way of elevating good ones and canceling bad ones. So if you're going to just leave it at that, I'm all for, disempowering universities. I'm all for opening the economy up to people without four-year degrees. I don't have a four-year degree. I'm all for that.
Yeah, to what you're saying, you could argue that is happening, because there have been a lot of articles written about how a lot of kids are deciding to go to these southern schools that they never would have looked at before, because they don't want to deal with the DEI at the Harvard. They're deciding to go to Texas Methodist, places they never look, University of Mississippi, places that kids in that class never would have looked at before. There go. So you could say that was already happening.
Yeah, no, I think that was already happening, which is why I'm saying, like, this draconian crackdown on curriculum is unnecessary. Like, in principle, I'm opposed to it, but it's also unnecessary. Like, you don't really have to do it. In terms of structurally attacking the standing of these universities, yeah, I mean, I'm for that. I've been for that my whole life. I'm a libertarian on this issue, for sure.
Go full Marxist, man. Turn them into, like, barns.
Well, that's what I said. They should have their assets seized and be converted into public housing. On the student debt forgiveness side, yeah, of course. So yeah, I have no argument with that core part of it. But look, they can't help themselves, because
I think they'll turn it into Hillsdale. They'll just wind up going in the other direction. Like, if you gave them their wish list, they're not going to get rid of censorship. They're going to censor from the right. You're not going to be able to have a class about Israeli colonialism in Palestine under them if they had their way.
Right. Yeah. Well, yes, of course. All right. Yasim Miller says, good morning to you both. Good morning to you, Yasim. You will create separate videos for each segment, correct? Yes, that's generally how we
always do. You know that. You're regular.
That's how we do it. Looking forward to sharing them with my depressed and still in denial Kamala Biden friends. Yeah, well, there's still, just check out our library. Check the videos tab. You'll see all of the clips there. Gavin Hillick, thanks for the €5. European neolibs allied with the left and increased immigration beyond capacity, and only right-wing nationalists are opposing it. Expect more of this, says Gavin Hillick. Thank you for that donation, my friend. Cool Blue, shocked the D's lost this election. There we go. Cool Blue had the electoral map perfect, so I know that was sarcasm there. For someone on a word salad diet, not very healthy looking. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Good one, Eric Cousseau. Eric Cousseau's got jokes this morning. Eric Cousseau is sharp in the morning, and for Eric Cousseau, it's early. The show starts at 6 a.m. for Eric. He wakes up early for us on these morning shows.
By the way, somebody's correcting me, and you're right. Yeah, Southern Methodist. That's what I meant. Southern Methodist University.
Oh, okay. Russ is an honorary Paisan because of his Italian surname pronunciation. There you go. Thank you.
You can tell I grew up with Italians, right?
Yeah.
Like every other foreign country we do a story on. It's like Hassadla.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
With the Italians, I'm like Fabrizio Manzini.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, let's keep going here, folks. All right, so the Democrats' postmortem continues after the Trump landslide. James Carville Want some accountability. Justify what you did. Listen to Politics War Room with Al Hunt and I for more. So here's James Carville reaming the Democrats for leaning too hard into identity politics, among other procedural missteps in the 2024 campaign.
State power, we have no executive power, we have no judicial power. So when you're out of power, you're an opposition party.
Sounds like the cat's getting one of the cayenne pepper enemas.
Yeah. Just gonna say.
Yeah.
That cat's got a whole mess of Tabasco coming out its little asshole.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And go and tell all of the people that are sending you and asking you for money, justify what you did, justify what you did wrong, and tell us what you're going to do different. Because what you've done ain't worth a shit. Get your head around that. And all of the Washington-based Democrats farting around, going to wine and cheese parties and talking about how misogynistic race is, get your ass out of Washington and go work on a 2026 campaign and do penance to make up for your goddamn arrogance and stupidity. Well, we're going to say we told you so. We told you this identity shit was disaster. We told you to get out in front of public safety issues. You didn't. We told you to have an open process and demonstrate the magnificent, and staggering, and deep talent that exists in the modern Democratic Party. You didn't.
I mean, when did you do that? Like, that's revisionist history on his part. Yeah, we wanted an open primary. When? We follow this shit for a living. When did you guys want an open primary? Never. You wanted Biden to drop out the day after the debate, which wasn't going to happen. Well, you're telling me that 28 days is what cost you the election?
Obama had a pick. He didn't want an open primary. He wanted you to install his guy.
Yeah, exactly. But what he says there before that, blaming identity politics, getting on the wrong side of crime issues, he'll echo that in the second piece that you'll play in a second. I'll let this finish first.
We told you to differentiate yourself from Biden. You didn't. I hate to be some fucking know-it-all, but all of these things are part of the record.
All right. So then he goes on CNN with Christian Amanpour and kind of doubles down on his critique of wokeness being an operative factor in the race.
Give Harris credit. She didn't use any of the woke language, but this is like trying to wash clothes that's got smoke all over them. You can't get the stench out. And you could ask Senators Manchin, Senator Casey, Senator Brown, Senator Tessa, if they don't think that defund the police had an adverse effect on attitudes toward the Democratic Party. My God, you're right. It was so stupid, no one wanted to bring it up, 3 years later, but the residue of it just stuck with us. And you got to read exactly what was said, exactly what I said. And it's going to take more than one cycle to get this stench off of the Democratic Party. And it's a stench of the highest order, let me tell you.
Well, one way to get that stench off of the Democratic Party would be to replace that with an economic program that you can then brand yourself around. This is what I don't understand about people like James Carville. They will decry the Democrats' sort of weaponization of identity politics and wokeness, but they have nothing to replace it with. It was Hillary Clinton's campaign who accused Bernie Sanders of being sexist and racist when he talked about regulating the banks. She said breaking up the banks won't end racism, and you supported that candidacy. Which wing of the party elevated identity politics and elevated wokeness? It was the party that insisted they could not run on an economic message. So now you're saying, well, they can't run on the minimum wage, but they also can't run on identity politics. Okay, so James Carville, brilliant political strategist that you are, what are they supposed to run on? Because what Kamala ran on was nothing. Kamala's campaign message down the home stretch was literally, and this is not an exaggeration, it sounds ridiculous because it is, but it was literally, Liz Cheney likes me because January 6th was scary. That was the Kamala Harris campaign.
Much. That was the closing pitch.
That was it. That was the closing pitch. For the last month, you literally did not hear any other message coming out of the Kamala campaign except that. January 6th was a really traumatizing experience, and Liz Cheney was traumatized by that, and so she likes me because I won't do that. That was the campaign. That's nothing. That's neither identity politics nor class politics. It's nothing. Something has to fill that void. And the wing of the party that was viciously attacked by hatchet men and hacks like James Carville was the party that sought to substitute an identity politics driven message with a more meat and potatoes economically driven message. So I don't know what exactly you want. James Carville talks about this. Joe Scarborough talks about this. Well, they can't run on wokeness, but you don't want them running on the minimum wage either. What they want is for the Democrats to be the Republican Party that doesn't do January 6th. That's their vision. That's a loser. That's a loser. That's nothing. You can't run on nothing. Politics cannot be static. And this is why I said after the election of Obama, this end of history period set in with the Democratic Party. We have attained nirvana. We have elected an elegant, well-spoken black man who's going to do the bidding of the banks. They don't want anything beyond that, which means they are determined to simply stay still. And politics is about kinetic energy. You cannot stay still forever and win as a political movement, but that's what they're asking for here.
Okay, and it is also it's not a coincidence that all of them that are singing this song are almost exclusively talking about defund the police. Now, defund the police, they did legit shut up about years ago. I have not seen, even in the media supporters and boosters for Democrats, I haven't seen them talk about defund the police in about 3 years. So why are they only talking about that particular variety of woke signaling? Why are they not talking about how they signaled on migrants and immigration? Why are they not talking about the trans stuff? Why are they not talking about defining pornographic materials in the public schools as book banning when parents have the temerity? Many of them liberal parents, self-identified liberal parents, have a problem with that as bigots. No, none of them wanted to, not even James Carville will touch that. He just defund the police because
he said identity politics, but he didn't get specific.
But he doesn't get into specifics because they don't want to be attacked because that is such a large part of the Democratic Party's base. They won't get into it. They want to get into defund the police because that's consistent with their base. Their base doesn't have a problem with law and order, crack skulls in the street. They like that shit because their base is the old Republican Party. The current Republican Party is the old Democratic Party. So the kinds of people at this point who see Kamala running around with Liz Cheney and get all warm and fuzzy about it, you can work them up about how bad defund the police is. You start getting into some of these other issues, and those same kinds of people are much more aligned with them. They're much more trained to respond to the dog whistle of "you're anti-trans." So should we get into my part of this?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so hang on, you have this Al Jazeera thing in here.
There you go.
Okay. All right, so that was an accident. I was wondering why there was an Al Jazeera slide in there. I didn't take a close look at it. It was late. Okay, so we've seen this before, probably never quite as much as we're seeing it in this election. So, yeah, this is not the first time that you've had a bunch of people like Carville come out after a Democratic loss to talk about the wokeness or the identity politics as being the cause of the loss. And every time they do that, you get a hot take from certain people that because they didn't cut any ads with, a drag stripper straddling a toddler, they didn't actually, that's not a factor in their brand, that's the hot take. This is the smart take. No. What are you talking about? Wokeness. So really, everyone rallied around Jon Stewart's take about this. So we'll take a quick, brief, hopefully copyright safe look at what he said about it.
Problem with the woke theory. I just didn't recall seeing any Democrats.
Just a note, hold on, I'll start this. The reason the image is frozen, that's not a technical thing. We're just using the audio since they are bitches about using their video. So that's why.
I only have one problem with the woke theory. I just didn't recall seeing any Democrats running on woke shit. These were the commercials I saw for the Democrats.
Sherrod Brown is working to fix our border crisis.
Mondaire Jones is working to secure our border.
Pat Ryan is restoring order at our southern border.
I'm Laura Gillen, and I'm here at the border of Nassau County. We're 2,000 miles from Mexico, but we're feeling the migrant crisis almost every day.
Okay. All right. So Crystal, we're not going to play that video, but Crystal jumped right on that take. And hey, some of what she says here is right, and I agree with. She points out how Kamala had someone on our team who kind of invented the idea of popularism, essentially. Poll people, see what's popular, and just hit that. Now, who they polled where they found what was popular was Liz Cheney, who knows. But her overall argument is sound, but the part of it that is not sound is that is absolutely absurd to suggest that because when election time rolled around, they didn't decide to dig up the corpse of Devine and get an endorsement, that is not part of the Democratic plan. They haven't done everything possible over the past several years to make identity politics, whatever you want to call it, part of their brand is absurd. Now, wherever you see mommy, you're going to see little Kyle there. Kamala and her entire team never used pronouns. She never mentioned her race or gender, never engaged in cancel culture. She highlighted freedom and patriotism, would deflect when asked about race or gender, and say, I'm going to represent all Americans. Stop watching these idiotic cable news hosts. Physician, heal thyself. They're part of the problem. Their only answer for decades of failure is to move further right. Okay, so this is not at all part of Kamala's brand. That's so spurious to suggest that. Oh, libs of TikTok. She literally has pronouns in her bio. And there you go. She, her. Now, this was a little conference she did. It looks like at the height of COVID. The way she describes herself is pretty bizarre.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome these leaders for coming in to have this very important discussion about some of the most pressing issues of our time. I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit. And good afternoon.
Oh, okay.
So I guess there was a blind person at the table who didn't know. Or was she saying that in case there was a blind person at the table?
I don't get the blue. She's such a weirdo. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But you can't really say this was not part of her signaling. I still remember when she was running in 2020, she came out and announced her pronouns to wild applause from the libs in the audience.
Well, I would say, hold on, before we move on, I would just say the more you co-opt the messaging of the Republicans on the more material issues, like immigration, like crime, the more the cultural signaling stands out, because you're not drawing a clear line of distinction between your vision and the Republicans' vision on the border. I mean, they're correct. Right. The Democrats ran as border hawks this time. Right. So did the Republicans. Sure. So what? You're the border hawk. Okay, so voters are looking, when voters are deciding who to vote for, they're looking at how the parties are different, not how they're the same. So the more you co-opt the Republicans' point of view on economics, on national security, on foreign policy, on immigration, on criminal justice, and there's very, very little difference between the parties now on those big issues, well, then what do people look for? They look for how you're different. And so that's where that woke kind of signaling stands out like a sore thumb, because the Republicans aren't about that, and you are. That becomes a branding differentiation.
Well, and also, this really shows you how little they really think of voters and how stupid they really think they are. To come out with the take that because for a couple of months they swept everything they've been signaling for years under the rug. So what? So the voters were just going to forget? They were just going to forget the topless trans people on the White House lawn on Easter? They were just... that was just going to go out the window. You troglodytes, We ran ads about the border. Forget about how hysterical we were about Abbott sending these migrants to blue cities. See, we ran tough ads on the border, and it just shows how these commentators really just think people are stupid. That you think that that's an own to show that they ran these ads after years of saying something different, and all of a sudden everyone was just, well, you're supposed to just accept that that's the truth, because that's what they told you in these ads at the end of years of saying something completely different. For example, what? You think people forgot about this? You think they forgot about Dylan Mulvaney with the sole qualification being having created a show around their transition, gets a seat in the Oval Office at a conference? People just forgot about that. And I'm not even litigating or interrogating. Maybe you agree with this. Maybe you think this is great. That's not even what I'm talking about. You cannot say this is not part of their brand because they ran some ads at the end. That is just not honest. That is it. Really? Really? You see these pictures and you ask the average person, who do you think was behind this, Democrats or Republicans? What are they going to say? What would you say if you didn't know anything about it and you said, who appointed these people to an office? Would you think Democrats or Republicans? And to say, well, this is something the pundits and the media are putting on them. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Nobody made them do this. Nobody made them make these choices. Federal judge blocks Biden's new Title IX rule expanding protections for LGBTQ plus students. Now, of course, PBS phrased it this way, but what this proposed change would do is change the definition of sex to include gender. So the ruling Monday in Kentucky was applauded by the state's GOP Attorney General, Russell Coleman, who said the regulation would undermine equal opportunities for women. Quote, the judge's order makes clear that the U.S. Department of Education's attempt to redefine sex to include gender identity is unlawful and beyond the agency's regulatory authority. Now, maybe you think this is great. Maybe you think this is great. That's fine. That's not what we're talking about here. You cannot say the Democrats did not, both in word and in deed, in legislative deed, embrace these ideas that I would argue are deeply unpopular and repulsive to a lot of the country. I would argue in cases like this, we know from the polling, men and women's sports, boys and girls sports, people are overwhelmingly against that. They didn't just forget about this because you didn't run an ad with a drag queen. Immigration. Who's the party who's saying AOC and New York Democrats beg Biden for faster migrant work authorizations? Now, again, maybe you think that's a good idea. You can't say they didn't run on it after for years signaling this way just because they didn't run ads that way when it came election time. At that point, it's too late. In that sense, Carville's not wrong. What he's not accounting for is it's not an accident. This is the belief system that the party has been putting out. Now, as you point out, because they've become a contradiction in terms, a Wall Street-owned left party, it's hard to imagine what they would run on if they did not run on that, because how else do they differentiate themselves from the Republicans? That's what the whole post-Bill Clinton hellscape of the Democratic Party is. It's a party that's thrown the working class under the bus. So they're essentially Republicans. All they can run on are these things. They're between a rock and a hard place. So, yeah, what do I think they're going to do? Are they going to go back to their FDR roots, or are they going to try to out-Republican the Republicans yet again? They're going to do the latter because it's not a political party. It is a get-rich-quick scheme for the dissolute children of millionaires. That's what this is. There was just an article, another one from Lee Fong, another banger, about how much of that money that Kamala spent went to companies owned by Democratic operatives and donors and their kids. This is what this is. It's a big grift. So they have no motivation to change. That's the grift. That's the grift, to make money, to turn into a party that can no longer solicit those millions of dollars. They're not going to do that. And if they take up the cause of the working class, that money's going to dry up. They go back to having to go back to the unions. Oh, but they can't because they broke those unions that used to be the backbone of their get out the vote operation.
Yeah, and a lot of that working class support has now gone to
It's gone.
Trump. Yeah. Yeah, that is what has happened to, that sort of base. And so now you're stuck with a party that is having to basically run to the right, which has become the center on issues like immigration, criminal justice. And then what stands out? What stands out are the differences in cultural signaling. And I do think that this divide was greatly exacerbated by the pandemic. The pandemic radicalized a lot of apolitical people into politics, disproportionately middle class to upper middle class white people. We interviewed Gary from Nerdrotic yesterday, and I didn't ball bust about this because it wasn't my channel, but if he were here, I certainly would have. He mentions how he was basically apolitical, living in California his whole life, until his wife's hair salon got shut down under the COVID rules. And that radicalized him, and he moved to Texas, and now he's in Texas, and now he does, an anti-woke show business YouTube channel. Well, this is an example of someone who was apolitical until they felt the government's boot on their neck, and that radicalized them in a way. And I think part of why people like that really gravitate towards anti-woke politics is because they are very offended by other people's claim to victimhood. Why? Because their radicalization, their whole political understanding developed just a short time ago, and it's born of their own sense of victimhood. They felt the government's boot on their neck for the first time. And so now they see themselves as having a claim to victimhood that they are then offended when other people claim that same thing. And I'm not saying that you don't have a legitimate grievance. Obviously, Nancy Pelosi went in maskless to get her hair done, and they shut this guy's wife's small business down. I'm not saying you don't have a legitimate grievance, but I'm saying that this culture war got really exacerbated at that time when, frankly, and our friend Nick has said this, and I think he's 100% right, that was the first time, COVID was the first time when a lot of white people felt oppressed by their government. Now, the COVID rules had a big effect on black-owned small businesses. What was it, 40% of them got shut down? But black people are used to having the government's boot on their neck. A lot of these middle-class white people weren't, and a lot of them didn't pay attention to politics until they became victimized. So, motherfucker, to a certain extent, you're fucking woke, right? I mean, your whole political understanding is based upon your own attachment to your own victimhood. That's woke, as it's currently defined now, whatever the original definition meant. That's woke. So everybody's woke now. It's a big pissing contest. It's a very unhealthy way to have political conversations, to be in a constant competition for who got screwed over the most. It's anti-solidarity. It's anti-progress. I think it's just a giant drain that we're all circling. And the only way to move past that is to center class politics that unite people across all of these different lines. And I think the pandemic really set us back in that way. It really set us back in a huge way. Because of the measures that were put in place, it ended up really activating a lot of people who now see themselves as having a special claim to the kind of oppression, and then they get apoplectic. Oh, why are there pronouns in this person's bio? Pronouns in someone's bio don't really affect you at all. At all. And I think the whole discourse is just so destructive. It's so petty. It's so divisive. We have to move past it.
I think you're looking at one side of it. I think there is legitimately a attempt by what some would call symbolic workers or knowledge workers. There is an attempt to assert their class privilege and their separation from the working class through pronoun theater and this kabuki. So there is an underlying class element to those standards and those ideas, which are just completely anti-rational in many areas there, as we've increasingly seen. I might cover it on Jimmy's tomorrow. They just refused to publish an article about that found in America. There are many articles published like this in Europe, found that puberty blockers are not safe and effective as advertised, and they won't publish it. They won't publish it because they're afraid that they're going to stop prescribing it if they publish it. I thought we followed the science. I thought we're supposed to follow the science. So you can't say, well, this is just a benign thing that you're making a big thing about that doesn't have any effect on you. It does if you have kids, right? And California just passed these laws.
No, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Can take away your kids if you refuse to play the gender game. So it does affect you. And you can't say, well, this is something that's just being made up. It's not being made up. It's for real, man. Yo, dude, if I had kids and I got put in that position, I'd wind up in jail, man. I'd wind up in jail. You try to take my kids over something like that. So it is a real thing. Now, you could say people were made more alert to it when it became more personal. Sure. I mean, that's true. But it already became personal. I mean, look, if you have a certain love, like if you're talking about that constellation of channels, you know, if you have a certain love of culture, of pop culture, and you're seeing this ideology come in and just absolutely destroy it, not because it's making it more diverse, but because their particular vision of diversity is so hostile to inclusion. I mean, it is hostile to the fan base that was already there. And it's, you know, I mean, we've discussed this offline the other day. Because of their ideology, because ideology takes the place of good storytelling, they've thrown out the basic heroic arc because women can't have the weaknesses that heroes have. You know, the Aristotelian rise, fall. You can't have it with a woman with this ideology. So if you really love that stuff, yeah, man, it does affect you. You know, so they were.
Yes, it affects. Yes, it does affect you.
I was watching that stuff before COVID. Like they were already talking about that before COVID. COVID definitely amped it up, as you say, because it became very personal. It was this is what I would say. You already had people pissed off about this, and that cranked it up to 11.
Yes, I would say yes. It does affect people. It is unfortunate that, you know, movie franchises that people used to like are now not really watchable. Yes, that makes you a victim of sorts. There are other victims in the world who I would argue have suffered far greater plights than to have your favorite franchise ruined by wokeness. And now, because of this new phenomenon, now you have industries where you have basically in the gamer sphere and in the manosphere, you basically have a few very lucky people who have really been able to monetize having no life whatsoever. And then what they've been able to do is they've been able to influence a lot of younger men who are struggling socially into believing that it's the society's fault and it's the culture's fault that they don't have a life. Well, then I mean, that is a claim to a certain victimhood, which I thought we're supposed to be rejecting. I thought that's what all this woke stuff was. It's the oppression Olympics, right? Like, everybody's fucking woke now. That's what it is. It's all woke politics to an extent. It's all now, I guess, when the white majority claims victimhood, it's not woke because there's more of them than they are of everyone else. So everyone else's claim to victimhood is somehow this affront to real politics. I think their bullshit is an affront to real politics. I have never met a sect more obsessed, more convinced of their own victimhood and more attached to their own sense of victimhood than the dissident dialogues, anti-woke crowd. Bill Maher, oh, I can't go to a college campus anymore because they don't laugh at my jokes. I mean, come on. That's a fucking victimhood in and of itself. That's what all of this is. It's fake politics. It's fake politics. It's counterfeit politics.
Sure. But it is something you can't. This is what I've always said about it. It is a trap, but that's what makes it such a good trap because you can't pretend it's not there.
Well, they're never gonna.
You do have to address it,
but you're never going to be able to escape it entirely. I mean, look, how long have conservatives been ranting about the war on Christmas, right? I mean, they'll always find something. There will always be something. Like, to a certain extent, you have to understand, okay, the limitations of like political engagement are such that we can't just stamp out cultural ideas that we find to be fringe. And there's always going to be
sure
political opportunists who will highlight that and magnify that. Like, that's just a permanent reality. Like, you're never really going to stamp it out. The solution is what I said at the beginning of the segment, and I know you co-sign, is you have to organize around issues that unite working class people that speak to their needs. Like, that has to be the ultimate organizing tool.
I agree.
And the Democrats refuse to do that, which is why they've dug themselves this hole. That's why they're in this woke hole. That's why they're there. Now, the Republicans are in a woke trap, too. The only problem is the people who are crying victims on that side are the majority race. And so it's not absorbed that way. I mean, it's just, I mean, like, yeah, you could say that the culture has turned against them. Yeah, cultures turn, cultures shift. There are other groups that have a giant claim to that. We interviewed, David Williams, a black Muslim guy who was entrapped and spent 15 years in jail because the culture turned against him after 9/11. So what did they do? They sent the FBI to frame him on a fake terrorism charge, and he lost 15 years of his life. That's a victim of a cultural shift as well. Like, I mean, I feel bad for Star Wars fans to a certain extent, but it ain't that.
Sure. I think that's kind of like saying, you own a restaurant and you complain that you can't get these ingredients. There are people starving. It's so irrelevant. Like, that's the space.
What I'm saying is,
not everyone is doing this kind of a show, which is broadly addressing politics writ large. It's addressing a certain space in the culture, very specific space, and the analysis is not incorrect. Now, if we feel that culture is just not important, I would disagree. If we feel that even culture that's pop culture entertainment is not important, I would disagree. So at that point, is it legitimate to criticize a turn in those products that's made them unwatchable? I think so.
I'm not saying it's not legitimate. I'm just saying, if you're talking about within the context of a conversation, okay, how did this election go this way? Politically, how do you engage? These issues just must be backgrounded. They must be backgrounded because you can never stomp them out entirely.
That's for us. That's for us. And that's for channels like ours. And I think also,
we're on our channel. That's why I'm talking about it. Yeah.
Right. And I think also, and I've always said this, if you look at the underlying perspective, that, not everybody, you got a lot of people who are just on the grift, although I would argue more of those are in the straight politics space. But if you look at the sensibility, I mean, and this is true generally of MAGA, we've always felt, well, you could probably convert them if you had the right message and you completely disconnect from a lot of this cultural signaling. That has always been central to my theory that, what, these people really belong with us, but they think we're with them.
Right.
And that is partly, we did that segment a while ago. I was going to bring it up. I never got to it. We did that segment a while ago where I'm pretty sure it was Nerdrotic. They did a segment on the Indiana Jones movie where Phoebe Waller-Bridge says something snarky about capitalism, and that is why they have that association, because you have companies like Disney that are uber capitalist, that even as they cast this panoply of girl bosses, is being sued in a class action lawsuit for pay discrimination by women who are as capitalist as they come. They've connected these things in their products.
Sure.
That, like, saying something cheeky about capitalism and then punching poor old Harrison Ford in the face in the finale of your awful rape of this character, that those things are all connected.
Sure.
But hey, these people have a very large following. And if you can bring them over, it's going to bring a lot of people over. Right now, a lot of these people are MAGA because those are the only people who are speaking to them.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. And if I could stamp this all out of existence, if I could stamp the entire identity politics conversation out of existence, I would. But we just can't. Like, there is just no way to do that. Like, I wish there were a way to do that, but there just is none.
But when you're talking about the war on Christmas, look, that never got broad traction because it was so clearly addressing such a fringe element of society. That's the problem. That's the problem. It's not fringe anymore. It's literally, if you're just talking about this very specific niche, it's literally destroyed billion-dollar IPs that looked bulletproof.
Yes.
Star Wars, oh my God. I mean, there was no IP more bulletproof. Well, now they make these announcements. They're going to do a project. Nobody cares anymore. Like, you had to fuck that up so badly to get people not to care about that.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And like I said, if there were a way to stop this, I would. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's possible. Just like you can't stop an airborne virus with lockdowns because you can't lock down everybody. Like, you're never going to be able to just shut it down entirely.
Sure. But I think you can get it back to the war on Christmas level. Yeah, there will always be shit like that floating around, but not enough to impact something that with that kind of cultural cachet.
Right. And I think the way to do it most broadly and most effectively is to, like I said, organize around issues that transcend that, so that we are not competing for who the bigger victim is, which that's what all of this competition is.
Absolutely.
Everyone who makes anti-wokeness a part of their brand is woke themselves by that definition. That's what I'm saying. Like, anybody who plays that game is part of the problem, because what you're saying is you are offended by other people's claim to a certain victimhood, which is of course rooted in your own claim to your own victimhood. And this is why I say a lot of this started with the pandemic, because at that point the government's boot was on all of our necks, and so a lot of people who never felt victimized suddenly did. And I'm not saying that's illegitimate. Look, my wife and I both had to basically start our professional lives over. The pandemic just wiped out everything we had been doing up until that point. That's why she switched jobs, and I got lucky. I was able to speak into the microphone well enough for people to listen. So I'm not saying it's illegitimate. I'm just saying, when you play that game, when you take offense at someone else's claim to victimhood, I think to a large swath of people, it is rooted in their own claim to that same sense of victimhood, which is just wokeness and anti-woke. They are the mirror image of each other.
Sure. I mean, look, when I went to the douchebag dialogues, they're dealing with more serious matters. So you're getting into, the contradiction of supporting every State Department militaristic talking point while at the same time talking about anti-wokeness.
Right.
I think for a lot of people who deal more in culture, particularly if you're coming from the generational lens of Xers or even boomers who feel that way. A lot of them watch so much MSNBC, they can go either way. But, we kind of came up with this multiculturalism was the ideal at that time. And it was this vision, not that you ignore other people's victimhood or you're offended by other people's victimhood, but that you try to engage in a productive process of reconciliation and equality, universal liberalism. We're all human and we're all going to come together. And I think, it's very clear, particularly to people who came up with that as the left liberal ethos, that this has just taken a horrible turn into something that not only is not curing those problems, it's exacerbating those problems. It's actually turning us back to something we had started to get past. So I don't think by definition, people like myself, for example, who are offended by it, are offended by other people's claims of victimhood. It's not that. It's being offended that people are grifting off people's feelings of victimhood and choosing to use rhetoric around it that actually exacerbates and makes the problem much more likely to be permanent because they profit from that language. They don't actually want to solve it. That's what's offensive. It's not the victimhood. It's that people are promoting a way of approaching that ensures that the problem continues and is actually made worse.
Well, obviously, if I thought you were doing it, we wouldn't be partners. I'm not accusing you of doing it. For one thing, you don't draw a line around Gaza and the West Bank the way most of these anti-wokesters do. That's number one. Most of these anti-woke people, they are pouring gasoline on the fire and pretending that they're pouring water, right? They're just playing another side of the game. That's what it is to a lot of people. We don't do a show that centers around that. There are a lot of people who make a lot of money sitting on their ass bitching about wokeness and then claim that they're a victim of a cultural shift. This is a cultural shift of online content creation that has enriched you to no bound, like a Tim Pool type. That's what I'm talking about. So like, yeah, I mean, to me, it is a counterproductive way of engaging.
Well, this is a big question that I have about all of that, and particularly the culture, particularly the channels that focus on culture. Critical Drinker's talented. Gary's talented. They can probably make the transition. This shit is clearly dying. Like, this is clearly dying. Sure. There was only so much money they could lose before they changed course. And as Gary was saying on the show, it's going to take a few years because it's such a big boat that you got to steer with so many moving parts. You got projects already in the pipeline under a different cultural moment, but they are going to change. At that point, I guess the best of them become straight review channels and fan sites, right? But then a lot of them are just going to fall by the wayside. Like, I think the ones that really are just going on and saying, like Jeremy, like the Quartering, we're just going on to say, yeah, those darn woke idiots did it. Did you see what the actress from Wicked said?
Right.
I think those are going to be gone because what are they going to talk about?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, look, I think it is on the way out. I think this election was in a big way a lagging indicator of that. But I think the reason you saw this explosion of that around 2021, 2022, that's when Ryan Long put out that video of the woke versus the Klansmen or the woke racist. And by the time we showed it for him, he said, isn't this kind of passe? I think that's what he was referring to because this really exploded at that time. And it exploded at that time when a lot of people who were apolitical, and I'm not faulting, I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying if your political story begins at the moment when you felt the most victimized, then your center of political understanding is going to be your own victimhood. And that is woke. That is woke as defined by the very anti-woke commentators who make a fortune bitching when they see pronouns in a bio. That's all I'm saying. Like, that's my point. You understand that point?
Well, listen. You say what you want about Tim Pool. He's got a Yiddish cup under that beanie because we were live the other night. He had 83,000 people watching.
Oh yeah, no, he's good. He's good. I'm just saying, like, if like I think it can give a biased perspective, to people, So that's
sure.
What I'm saying. But like generally speaking, yeah. I mean, obviously, I agree that the brand is a terrible brand, and the Democrats have dug themselves into this hole by rejecting any alternative. Like, that's it. There is no other way they can be branded but that. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's for the party to be anything different from what it is, you'd have to get rid of everyone in it now.
Of course.
Everyone would have to go. Do you remember what they did when you'll probably remember the details better than I will. When we were still fighting the inside out strategy, what was it? The Democratic Party in Nevada that got taken over by
they got taken over by
Sandinistas,
basically DSA and they quit.
And they defunded them.
Yeah, they all quit. Yeah.
So that's what you're dealing with. Like, that's what would happen. Like, they don't care about the party. They don't care about policy. If people who they don't ideologically agree with, in other words, people who are just on the grift trying to get rich off this blue brand, were to take over, they'd pull all their money out. They would leave you with the shell. That's it. They'd probably go start their own fucking party to compete with you.
Well, of course, and now
they'd all join no labels. They'd make it a real political party.
Oh, of course, yeah, 100%. Well, now they're doubly fucked because now the people who they could, potentially build back with are not only disengaged, they're Republicans now. They're MAGA now. That's what that demographic showed. People under $100,000 a year went for Trump. The rich were the only demographic that the Democrats won. And I do agree with you that there is a class signaling embedded in the cultural signaling, right? That is a very real thing. Like because it strikes working class people. These are the only problems that you see because you don't have any material problems, right? So you fight in a postmodern realm because you have no concerns, you have no problems that politics can solve here in the real world,
right? And it's the way they distinguish themselves from the poors by mastering this very, very arcane language, these very complicated, very anti-material reality kind of abstract concepts that it's the old thing. Like, you have to have an education to be that stupid,
Well, of course, yeah.
To even think this way.
Yeah, and this is why I say, like, as a left moving forward, the answer is to transcend that. And I think part of how you transcend that is a relentless focus on what unites us along class lines. I think it's very easy to get baited into litigating this over and over again, thinking you can stamp it out. You'll never make it go away. There's always going to be these cultural battles. The right wing has become very, very skilled at bringing these things into mass marketability.
They always were.
Yeah, but look what they did with the Target thing.
But you gave them so much kindling. Well, that's a good example. Target, nobody told Target to do that. They gave them great kindling to build a fire out of. They always do.
I think they didn't give him that much, man. I saw people walking around. Like, I've been to Target. There's a kiosk of rainbow flag
They had those Red Sox ones.
Yeah, they had the Red Sox. Yeah, like there's a kiosk of Pride shirts.
Not now.
No, I'm saying even at the time.
Apparently that year. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on which store you went to. B is for binary books for kids. Like, yeah, man. I mean,
my kids were 2 years old at the time. I would go there for clothes for them very often. I never encountered any of this. Like, I'm not saying it wasn't out there. I'm saying that there is a whole media ecosystem that thrives off of inflating that. And they're very good at it. I'm not denying that it made an impact. I'm just saying, as a parent of a toddler who shopped at Target at the time, who you think would have been exposed to this if it were as widespread and as malicious as Benny Johnson claimed it was, I would have seen it. I didn't see it. That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying I didn't see it.
Yeah, okay. So I'll say this. Yeah, like their bread and butter is to jump all over it. They don't make the people that, I mean, I live here in New York. I come out of an arts background. I don't have to tell you. I mean, they didn't make these people fucking maniacs who will fucking try to cancel you for gendering, who fucking will sooner post a GoFundMe for somebody's top surgery than for a family that can't feed themselves. Benny Johnson didn't make that.
Oh, I agree.
And it's fucking real.
It's
not real.
Yeah.
And it's not a negligible. That's what I'm saying with the war on Christmas. That never had real reach beyond a very core Fox News kind of a crowd,
right?
Because it was fringe. It was very fringe. It's not fringe like that anymore. The people who they have a lot of cultural capital tend to subscribe to these ideas, and that's where there's a class element to it. Because those people across the board have been to college. That's another reason you see that real college discrepancy in the Trump voters. They're all college educated. I honestly, I don't know that I know anyone who talks that shit who doesn't at least have a BA.
Yeah, no, it is a very PMC oriented politics for sure. All right, let's take some super chats. We got one more piece. I know we went a little long today, but for good reason, I think. Sparky, thanks for the $5. Keep in mind, Israel has killed many more Americans than Iran. Remember the USS Liberty. Hey, good morning, Sparky. Tony B says, today on the Young Turks, Keaton and Russell will be sitting in. Thank you, Tony B. Were we competing against the Young Turks yesterday on the Jimmy Dore show? I remember somebody in the chat was like, get these two off the air. The Young Turks are beating you in the ratings. Well, if we weren't on, who would be? if we weren't on, then you'd really be taking a bath in the ratings.
Yeah, look, I mean, I never understand that. Like, what? Okay, so you love Jimmy, you love him, so you want him never to be able to take a day off,
right?
Like,
exactly.
what do you want? And if you don't like it when we're on, there's a really simple solution. Don't watch it.
Yeah,
don't watch it. That's all.
John Michael, come on. We were only supposed to listen to what candidates said last time they talked. We aren't allowed to look at what they said last week. Yeah, there you go. Thank you for that. Skyzar, thanks for the $5. Caitlin Johnson said last week, forget what they say, look at their actions. P.S. Is the way forward the Greens or a new one? Well, I would say it's definitely, I would say it's definitely a workers' organization. I would not be thinking about electoral politics now for a very long time. I just don't see that as something you could really make a serious pitch to. I think you need, if you're going to start running candidates, you run it out of a workers' movement. I think the Greens as a ballot line, if you want to run like presidential campaigns, we're talking about 20 years. You're talking about years down the road. Right now, you have to build labor power and just shut the system down until it bends to our will, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Focus on issues and causes, which is very typical of people who have been in the politics game a long time who are radical.
Yeah. Sparky, tell Trump to appoint Brown University's Mark Blythe as Treasury Secretary. Blythe knows austerity for the masses doesn't help economic recovery. He saw it mess up the EU. Yeah, Mark Blythe. What is that name? I forget. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. But yes, I've heard the name before. Howie Brown, thanks for the $5. My friend blows his brains out after COVID closes 3 Florida businesses, left his 10-year-old fatherless. That is horrible. That is horrible. John Michael, thanks for the $5. Keaton, you're missing the point of the pronouns, just like the mask issue. It is all about showing your compliance and outing those who won't comply. That is a certain element to it. Yeah.
That's the class element.
Yeah, that is a class element. Yeah, that's a conformity element.
They used to have, it's the new Victorianism.
Yeah. Blythe is ostensibly anti-Trump, but that's to keep his decent-paying U.S. university job. After being a starving professor in Scotland, Blythe's anti-Trump rhetoric may even help his confirmation. Do we know who's in the running? Treasury Secretary hasn't done that yet. DC says K-Dog spot on with the manufactured woke drama. Thank you, DC. Sparky, thanks for the $5. Jimmy Dore knows Mark Blythe. Check out Jimmy's shows where Mark's a guest several years back. Maybe you guys could have him on as a guest on the Jimmy Dore show or do Dissidents. Yeah, I've heard that name. It's not, the name rings a bell. Do you know Mark Blythe? The name definitely rings a bell.
Yeah, man, he's the one who said the Hamptons aren't a defensible position.
Was that him? That's what
Mark Blythe,
what I'm thinking of. Okay. Prester John, thanks for the 1999. To Steelman Nerdrotic, I would offer Film Threats Disney Files. When woke DEI supplants meritocracy in the workplace, it stakes industries in the working class. Identity can't be worth more than skill, effort, and talent. Thank you, Prester John. Landrew is here. Let's give a cowbell for Landrew and a sound drop for Landrew.
Damn.
Thanks for coming up with us, Landrew. Is the failure of the U.S. Treasury to sell 30% of the $24 billion 30-year-old bond auction one of the tipping points? The 10 federal banks had to pick up the leftovers at a loss. Free Palestine.
Landrew is dead.
Is the failure of the U.S. Treasury to sell 30% of the $24 billion 30-year-old bond auction one of the tipping points? Russell, have you heard about that?
I have not. When did that happen?
Yeah, I haven't heard about that.
So they couldn't get rid of their bonds?
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer
that's
for you,
kind
Andrew.
of a big deal.
Yeah.
Hang on. I'm looking at the financial news.
Yeah,
when did that happen?
I don't know. I'm assuming it's recent news. Russell's the finance guy. He would have heard about that. We might have to do something about that on a segment on that on Sunday. I wish we had a better answer for you, Landrew, for your donation, but we will we'll have to look it up for next time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's not on the front page on CNBC's site.
Yeah. Eric Maines, thanks for the $5. Just curious, as they are digging bodies out of North Carolina and we are preoccupied with nominees, where is the money for aid for disaster affected? Real victims want to know. Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, I agree. I agree. We should maybe look into that more as well. The nominations have been the big news this week. That's been the onslaught. But yes, obviously. Sparky, rather than college educated, it's college indoctrinated. Thank you, Sparky. Appreciate that very much.
I mean, there's a little bit about bonds here about how with the cuts in interest rates, the bond rates still haven't gone down because of the federal deficit. People are still putting their money there. But yeah, I'll look into it.
Eric Rousseau, damn, does this mean I'm not going to get to take that aliens gender studies class? How will I be able to score alien tang like Captain James T. Kirk? Thank you, Eric
That was
Rousseau.
one of my favorite Eddie Murphy bits from back in the day. Man, he fucked some green bitches. You know there's something wrong with the pussy when the bitch is green.
Fanny Arcos, the Uhuru 3 speech trial live reenactment, 11/21/12/5/12/12, theburningspear.com. Oh, are they going to do that? Are they actually going to reenact that? That's crazy. Wow. I have to look that up. I have to get back in touch with them, actually. Bueller, says Hillary Hinton. Matt Taibbi's Racket News co-host Walter Kern has a great response to Democrats' election 2024 loss. I don't care about their cope. I don't care about anything they say. That's the final triumph. Yeah, didn't Taibbi write something to that effect? I perused his more recent piece about it. I didn't read the whole thing. It was kind of long. But I did.
We've been doing show after show after show after show.
Montoya, thanks for the $10. Hi, guys. I love and listen to you. I'm in dire need of an audition scene partner and just realized I should ask you both. Where can a New Yorker go to find a live scene partner? Thanks. Where would you do? Would you just...
Why, you don't have any friends?
Well, now it's
you
Facebook.
Make your friends do it.
Right? Don't the theater people get stuff on Facebook? Like there are theater groups. Like when we posted our play submission thing, that was a Facebook.
It was all Facebook groups.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would imagine there's Facebook groups for that. I've been out of it for so long, man. I don't even know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it used to be like backstage you used to be able to just like post shit in theaters, but I mean, now the easiest thing would probably be in a Facebook group. I'm sure there's New York City
my
actors
experience
groups.
Was you would impose on a friend.
Yeah. You would impose on a friend. Yeah. Exactly. Make them feel guilty for not doing it. That's what it would do.
Exactly. This is probably the core reason for my splitting up with my wife. I hated that shit when she would make me be her scene partner.
Oh, that's right, because she was an actor, so you'd have to be their scene partner. Right?
I hated it.
Because it's very time intensive, and the thing is, like, you can't just coast through it. Like, it's not
right,
something
you have
can
to
do
actually
passively.
pay attention.
You actually have to do it, right?
Yeah. It would drive me crazy when she would ask me to do that.
Yeah, like sometimes, like when your kids want to go to bed and you got to read them a bedtime story. Yeah, you read it, but your mind can wander if you're really exhausted or not into it. With that, you got to be really in it every second.
Well, and especially remember at that time I was directing too, so then I come home to having to read sides with my wife.
Yeah,
you know. That's why, as a rule, I didn't date actresses.
Yeah, I could imagine that. All right, folks, we got one more segment. I know it's late, but this is a quick one and a really funny one. David Axelrod has a plan, folks. Panic not. Fear not, Democrats. David Axelrod says Dems need a strong and strategic party leader with broad experience in communications, fundraising, and winning elections. One thought I surfaced on Hacks on Tap, which is his podcast, Ambassador Rahm Emanuel. There may be others, but he is kind of... sui genesis. I don't know what the fuck that means. What does that mean? Is that a sophisticated college term that I don't know because I'm stupid?
Okay, so I think he's playing on a term because I thought it was like sui generis, but maybe he's playing.
Maybe it's
on
a
that?
typo. Maybe it's a typo. Maybe he meant sui generis. Dude knows how to fight and win. That's right. David Axelrod. So for those who thought, hey, maybe this provides a real wake-up call, maybe it's a splash of cold water to the face of the Democratic power players, David Axelrod says, no, Rahm Emanuel is the man for the job. So here's a clip of his podcast where he and his co-hosts here make the case.
I would do if they said, well, what should we do? Who should lead the party? I would take Ambassador Rahm Emanuel and I would bring him back from Japan and I would appoint him chairman of the Democratic National Committee because he is the most skillful political kind of infighter in the Democratic Party. He's been a member of Congress. He's been White House Chief of Staff. He's been the mayor of Chicago. Now he's been ambassador to Japan. And he ran in 2005 and 6 the campaign to take back the House when Democrats were trying to take back the House of Representatives. He knows how to do this, and he would be a presence in the media and so on, fearless about taking on Trump. I think that would be a really smart move.
How many people in this room know who Rahm Emanuel is?
Well, they all do.
Yeah,
in Chicago. You're in Chicago.
How many people in this room know that Rahm Emanuel is missing half a finger?
Yeah.
How many people in this room know that Rahm Emanuel is missing half of his middle finger?
And
Not
yet
very many.
And yet
it
he
is the
still
greatest
gets
thing
his
in the world
point
because
across.
he can give someone the bird right to their face, and it's not totally clear that he's flipping them off. It's a great asset. Trust me, he's tried that trick about 1,000 times.
Tell a quick Rahm story, and then I'm going to
Rahm with half a
David's
finger is
idea.
a speech impediment.
When years ago, when he was mayor, Axe and I went to a Bulls game, the great believer here, and we were having a lot of fun. And Axe said, "Look across the court, there's Rahm," and we waved, and somebody handed us binoculars, and he pointed at me and gave me the bird. So he is exactly the right guy. And I pitched the same thing on Substack earlier today, so great minds think alike. But I would not make him chairman of the DNC. I would make him dictator of the DNC.
Oh, good.
Because one weakness the Dems have is, all right, let's get the campaign circle together, all 23 of us, we all must be heard. Fuck that stuff, it's war. Republicans tend to have a much narrower command, and he is exactly the right guy for that
You think
job.
the title would go over, though? I don't know.
Oh,
Everybody's
we're to the point where that's
everybody's a
nuance.
little ouchy about the whole dictator thing right now.
To get a dictator, get a dictator.
To get a dictator, get a dictator. Bragging about what a fucking prick Rahm Emanuel is, as if the Democrats' problem this cycle was they just weren't nasty enough to Donald Trump. They just don't hate Donald Trump enough. There's just not enough
I don't
poison
think
spewing
people
from their
picked up
mouths.
on it. Yeah.
Like what we really need is a fighter, and by a fighter we mean an absolute bottom-feeding prick like Rahm Emanuel, who, when he's missing half a finger, that's a speech impediment, meaning he's so used to giving people the bird and the fuck you. Like the idea that you need to be nastier to Donald Trump, as if your whole brand for the last 8 years was not Trump hate. Yeah, they're acting like we were too what? You were too weak? You didn't hit Trump hard enough? I read an interesting piece.
Sui generis is in a class of its own.
Oh, okay. There you go. So that's what he meant there. He just did a typo. I mean, like, your whole brand these past 8 years has been nothing but Trump hate. Trump hate. That's it. That's what Kamala's brand was. A Republican who's not a January 6th. That's why Liz Cheney backed her. Like, that is what you ran on. That is what got you there. You really think the way out is another Obama? He helped us in 2005 and 2006. That's the problem. You haven't had a new voice in that long. They are just so attached to this. This is why it's a dying party. They have no ideas. They have no ideas. They have no nothing. Zero. Absolutely nothing. And people are starting to push back. So these are people who ostensibly follow David Axelrod. Lorenzo Maldonado, no thank you. Hard pass. 2 words. Laquan McDonald, yes, whose murder Rahm Emanuel covered up as mayor of Chicago. Once more, just total contempt for the base of the party, which is still African-American voters, despite the inroads that Trump made. Oh, yeah, Rahm Emanuel. Ibrahim Zabad, aren't you one of those who advised the Democratic Party and led to this massive loss? Should really be a death knell for the Democratic Party. Those whose advice led to a disaster should take a break. A long one.
But they never will, because that's the point.
Exactly.
The point. It's not a political party. It's a professional opportunity.
Yes, exactly. And especially to insiders on an insidery podcast like David Axelrod's, that's how they think. Right. That's how they think. Oh, hey, I remember we were at a Chicago Bulls game. He gave the guy the finger from across the court. That's That's evidence he should lead the Democratic Party after they just took a complete bath after 8 years of running on Trump derangement syndrome. That's what you need. You need more partisan, petty anger in the party, apparently. Sit down, Dave, says screams children removed. Over there next to Rom, neither of you two say anything for the next 4 years. I said, really trying to shore up the Boardwalk Empire background extra vote. Making Rahm Emanuel. That's what he looks like. That guy looks like a character out of Boardwalk Empire. Looks like an old-time gangster.
I could see that.
Like one of Al Capone's bootleggers, like in the crew, you know? That's Rahm Emanuel. That's what I think when I see Rahm Emanuel. So, yeah, that's his idea. So any hopes you had for this being a wake-up call? Like I said, they always posture for a few days that it was a wake-up call. And then a week
Bernie
later, it's
made
back
some
to,
good points.
Yeah, exactly. Always
well,
reverse
and
to
what's
that.
we talk a lot about the peasant mind regarding kind of the libertarian adjacent, but the peasant mind for libs are the people who listen to this and think it makes good sense. These people get so brainwashed that they get excited, and I know people like this. I really do. I know it's hard to imagine. Usually when I get together with them, my tongue is bleeding from biting it afterwards, because otherwise there'd be no more relationship. But yeah, no, I know people like this who are very excited about Rahm Emanuel, who will talk about politics in those terms, about how interesting it is that he's the brother of Ari Emanuel, who was the basis for the agent on Entourage. And that's how the media, that's how figures like Axelrod massage your brain. That's how they teach you to think about this. I shared this tweet a while ago. Somebody had a picture of Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton, and the legend was, I know this would never happen in a million years, but God, what I would fucking give for this ticket. That is the lib peasant mind.
Yep.
That is the lib peasant mind. Like that, how fucking brainwashed do you have to be that lives in your headspace? You know what would be so cool? Kamala.
Yeah.
Like, wow, what did they do to you, man? That makes that you. What do you think that would do for you?
Right.
Like, what advantage would that have? Like, okay, so suppose they won, what? Because you would own the chuds. Is that what it is? I mean, that's really what it is, right?
Oh, of course.
I mean,
yeah,
you'd own them.
That's
wow,
what politics is. Yeah.
that would drive them crazy.
Well,
that would drive them crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, this relates back to our previous segment. When you don't have problems that politics can solve, that's what it's all about. It's just all a virtue signal. It's all about trolling the other side, right? I mean, that's basically their ethos. And to get excited about a potential Kamala Hillary ticket. I mean, these are the kind of people who absorb these ideas. Why would anybody? I mean, who would listen to a David Axelrod Dem Insider podcast a week after this blowout? Like, how could you actually value what they have to say at this moment in time? I came across this because it made headlines that he floated Rahm Emanuel, and so then I listened, because it's always more interesting to play audio for the audience than to read about it. So I listened to it. I'm like, Jesus Christ, who can fucking... Thank God I did a word search, so I was able to like figure out where in the podcast they said this, so I didn't have to listen to the whole thing, because it was toward the end.
And you can do that.
You can, apparently, on Apple Podcasts. You could do a word search of the transcript. That's a very useful tool. Yeah, absolutely. It really came in handy.
And it'll give you the timestamp. It'll tell you
not the
like
timestamp, but you can get like an idea. Like
an
I
idea
could see
of
this
where
was
it
toward
would
the
be.
end, so I could at least skip the
right.
first 45 minutes.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how that works. All right, let's take some more super chats and Rumble rants before we close the lights here.
It's very long for a Thursday show.
It was long for well, because we had to break that Alex Jones news. That took 20 minutes. Otherwise, it would have been kind of normal. We added a story, and we didn't take one away. But yeah, kind of a marathon morning show here in a very busy week. All right. Sparky says, fun fact, both Ukraine and Israel have taxpayer-funded healthcare. American taxpayers. Thank you. Prester John says, Keaton is right, but Chappelle has a bit on comparative suffering. It's pointless. I agree it's pointless. When I'm hungry, I'm aware there are starving kids in Africa, but I still want lunch. Sure. Sparky, thanks for the $5. Just think how bad it'll be if China unloads its U.S. Treasury bonds. Yeah, no, my point is that it doesn't occur to people when they are in a majority that they're engaging in comparative suffering. I don't believe in comparative suffering. I think it's a destructive way of arguing. What I'm saying is there's a tendency among white males
you're saying you're all doing intersectionality.
Right. What I'm saying is there's a tendency among white males to think they're not engaging in that when they call out wokeness because they're in the majority, right? Whereas to the person in the minority, it plays the same way. That's what I mean. I think it's all engaging in comparative suffering, which I'm against. I agree with you. Sparky, just think how bad it'll be if China unloads its U.S. Treasury bonds. Jay Tolbert, thanks to the $9.99. So the guy who was forced to hold the CPD accountable in the shooting death of Laquan McDonald and close down schools in poor black neighborhoods here will be good as the DNC chair. Yeah, no, it's completely delusional. It's just so symptomatic of how no matter what, they are just unbreakable in their conviction that it's got to be one of them, really, in Axelrod's case. Don't forget, Rahm Emanuel is Obama's chief of staff. Glove Arm, thanks for the $3. Let us vote on policy and ignore staffing, please. Well, yeah, right now the staffing is kind of the issue, and especially with a guy like Trump, who's as malleable as he is, that it does matter who he surrounds himself with, for sure, as we learned the first time, right? I don't think Trump, of his own volition, would have prosecuted Julian Assange, but Pompeo in his ear made the difference, and that's not an excuse for Trump. Like, I can't stand these people, oh, he was manipulated. Look, you either believe he's a strong leader or you don't. Most of the time you do, except when he fucks up. Then you blame the advisor. You blame
the people around
him. The oldest trick in the book. Blame the advisor, right? Dems deserve to lose, but it's easy to forget how psychotic the GOP is. Spouses on DACA, too recent for any progress. All I see in the future is pain. These people will smile when he loses everything. Yeah, no, that is a sadistic. There is a sadistic strain of that for sure, and we want to. We definitely want to talk about that. Sooner than later, which we will. We have some plans. MLK wasn't assassinated over identity politics. They murdered him over class politics. 100%. Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. What was he, organizing garbage workers there? That's what he was there in Memphis to do, right? Sanitation workers. Yep.
And that was also the tack his politics had taken at that point overall.
Yep. If you notice, that's when they killed him. When did the war on Christmas end? I don't remember the troops coming home. Were there parades? Thank you. Did y'all cover the FEMA story? No, we may do that tomorrow on the Jimmy Dore Show. We will look into that. We have another show tomorrow. Don't forget, 4 p.m. Eastern. I am not woke. I am not anti-woke. I am broke, but identify as anti-broke. There you go. Thanks, Eric Russo. Appreciate that. Eric Russo's on fire this morning.
He's on fire.
He's on fire. You should be a joke writer for us. To a Gen Xer, was Run DMC's collaboration with Aerosmith woke? Does multiculturalism in itself breed victimhood? How does multicultural representation in a commercial hurt you personally?
No. I'm saying that was what we came up with, and it was good.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, particularly if you came up with that, it was a very hopeful vision of the future. And this is this version of civil justice, social justice, it's very bleak, and it's very zero sum. It's very much about everyone against everyone in a big intersectional clusterfuck.
And it's joyless. It's humorless too. That's how you really could tell. It's humorless.
Right.
It's humorless. You know, when you talk to one of these people, it is almost impossible to make them laugh. Almost impossible.
Right.
It is like pulling teeth, getting one of these people to laugh at anything.
And if the joke's a little edgy, forget about it.
Well, especially guys like us who traffic in that. Yeah, if it's anything like that, it is super difficult. Super difficult. I've noticed that. Dan Richmond, Joy F. Mary Kill, Joy Reid, Joy Behar, Kamala, Joy Psyop. Yeah, there you go. Well, that is a tough one. I mean, we can't do the kill part on YouTube, but I would say if you're going to talk about effing versus marrying, well, that's brutal. I mean, you wouldn't want to fuck or marry Behar, so that's out. She's out.
Yeah.
So then you're stuck with Joy Reid or Kamala.
I mean, we know Kamala could suck the chrome off a trailer hitch.
I would say probably, yeah. And I would say, Kamala is just probably too unbearable to be around long term. So we'll go with fuck Joy Reid Kamala, marry Joy Reid. I think that's the right call. That's the right call. And we mean no harm upon Joy Behar. It's just process of elimination. So I would have to say, the Kamala would be the fuck element. Joy Reid would be the marry element. Not that Joy Reid's a prize, but compared to Kamala, I mean, Kamala is just too awkward. You can't be around that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be. I mean, that you can't live with that. Party politics is fatally flawed because their core motivations as corporations is in direct contradiction to what masses need. Thank you, Ranger Biker. These should go the way of the Whigs. Thank you, Cool Blue. Appreciate that very much.
They're going that way.
They are going that way. Indeed. All right, folks, that's our show. Hey, that was a long one for the morning, but we made it. Thank you very much for being here with us this morning. That's it for Due Dissidence until Sunday. Sunday. So what we're going to do on Sunday is at Kevin Augustine's request, which we're happy to accommodate since we're all about getting the word out about his show. That stream at 2 p.m. is going to be for everybody. It'll be a Rumble exclusive, The People versus Nature, Kevin Augustine live performance show with Jimmy Dore talkback after the show. And then I will be live with Tusker at, I guess, 7 o'clock regular time.
She can't do it. We got to figure something out.
Oh, she canceled?
I told you that. I told you she's on
call.
call.
I thought you said she can do it. I must have misread it.
She's on call. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said she can do it. Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll figure something out. Anyway, 2 p.m. live on Rumble, and then I'll figure out something for Sunday night. Don't worry. We'll still have a show Sunday night. And Russ will join that in progress, I suppose, on his way back from the theater. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you all. Please hit that like button on the way out. Hit that subscribe button on the way out. Hit that follow button on Rumble on the way out. We will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern on the Jimmy Dore Show with special guest Tom O'Neill, author of Chaos. Until then, thanks for waking up with us. Be safe and be well.
Courage!
Please clap.